Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. I'm your host, Lyndon Willoughby, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. Matt, we had an experience getting ready to record this episode of Pod tonight.
It was almost farcical, some might say.
It was, well, you saved an adorable woodland creature.
I did. It was basically, I was a druid or a ranger character in Dungeons and Dragons, and I used animal friendship to save the tiny little baby itty bitty bunny. Like, this is probably the smallest wild bunny I've ever seen in my life. Obviously, I've seen like newborn bunnies in pet shops and stuff, but this is a wild rabbit that, I mean, the thing's probably like less than a month old. Is itty bitty. So it was really fun though, because we're sitting out here, we're setting up, we're getting ready, and comes screaming down the hallway into the courtyard is Gatsby the pup, Deucer, and we're like, what are you doing? And like, look, dogs get zoomies every once in a while, right? And Gatsby is not immune to the zoomies. So we're like, okay, he's just doing something dumb, maybe chasing a June bug or whatever. And then I look a little bit closer and I'm like, no, he's actually chasing something. Is that a mouse or a rat? And I'm like, oh no, look, it's a little tiny baby bunny. And Gatsby was chasing and or herding the creature, because as a corgi, he has deep rooted herding instincts, and he wasn't like biting it and he wasn't like picking it up in his mouth or anything. And so I just went over there and I gently scooped the tiny baby bunny up in my gloved hand. The glove was a good call because it did shit all over me, or all over the glove. And I scooped it up and I just took it back to where we think its nest is, over on the other side of the yard, and put it back with its, hopefully, its brothers and sisters and mom and dad are under there. At least we hope.
I think that you assembled a respectable amount of good karma in the saving of this critter, Matt.
Oh, I certainly hope so. We put that out into the universe.
Yeah. So anyway, it was an adorable way to start off the night, if nothing else.
Yeah, it was. And Gatsby looked very proud of himself. Like the look what I found. Look what I found. I did good, right? And yes, Gatsby, you did very good.
You did great.
And you didn't kill it, so even better.
We would have been upset if this story ended in bunny death.
But it did not. It ended in bunny life.
It did. So everything's all good to go. The bunny was saved. We'll post that picture in the Discord a little bit later because it's adorable. We did take a picture. So
yeah.
Unfortunately, my 2.5-year-old little dude was asleep for this. Otherwise, we would have had,
that would have been fun.
The cutest photo opportunity of all time.
Yeah, the toddler petting baby bunny.
Yeah,
there's nothing cuter. That's
immediate spectacular.
Immediate Hallmark card.
That's okay. You can't catch them all. Unlike Pokemon, you truly cannot. Although I can't even catch all the Pokemon anymore.
That's true. That's because you're old.
Several thousand of them. Who's got the time for that?
No, nobody.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, moving on from Animal Ranger Matt Willoughby, who joined us for the episode tonight. We are pleased to welcome back onto the podcast, returning guest, one of our favorites. Truly, like, always a great time when this guy comes by, and it's been quite a while. Last time we heard from him was midway through the Minish Cap season, and we're a little ways down the road from that. So thrilled to welcome back onto the pod, Max Nichols, my coworker at Bungie. Max, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be back. It's been far too long since I chatted with my friends. And appeared in front of your enormous audience for 3 months or something like that.
I would say we have a modest size audience. And they're all great. What our audience lacks in like 6-digit numbers, it makes up for in spunk.
Definitely spunky, no doubt about that.
Well, as an active Discord member, whenever I appear now, it just feels like I'm talking to like 30 people that are on the Discord. It's basically just a intimate gathering with friends.
Yeah, those 30 people rock though. So I mean, really, if you were going to have a chat with any 30 people,
it's like a world class movers and shakers.
It's a good group, no doubt, and it makes it a little easier when you just think about it as fireside chat with my buddies. If you think about it in terms of I'm talking to 2,000 or 3,000 people and giving them my opinion on things, sometimes that can be a little daunting. But when you think about just it's 30 guys and gals who I talk to on a basically daily basis, so it makes it a little more close to home.
Yeah. The first time I appeared on this podcast, I don't think I've ever told you guys this, but I was like super nervous leading up to it because I'd never been on a podcast before. And I had like stage fright. I was like, oh God, I have to rehearse what I'm going to talk about. I had like pages and pages of notes.
How far we've all come.
Yeah,
right?
Seriously. My God.
Yeah, now I can just say whatever's on the tip of my brain and it's probably fine.
Well, the great thing too was that like all that prep you did for that very first episode was like in hindsight all in preparation for your like 45-minute water temple appearance that you were on the very first time we ever spoke.
Which looking back now, if we ever had a 45-minute episode, everyone would be writing in saying, "Did you lose half the episode? Like what happened?"
I guess since it's a new season, I should probably introduce myself again.
Oh, that's probably good.
Yeah.
Which is to say, I am Max Nichols. I'm a game designer, have been for, 14 years or so. I currently work at Bungie as an activity designer. And I have had a lifelong fascination with the Zelda series. It's the reason I'm a game designer. I've made various Zelda fan sites over the years. And I'm on this podcast because I tried to buy Zelda art from Lyndon once, and I succeeded. And then he invited me on a few months later.
And it hangs in your office to this day, or at least it was there when I was at your house.
Yep.
So,
no, I can see it right now.
That old
it's one of your controller pieces of the Master Sword Glade on the SNES controller
on purple paper, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, those were your really popular ones.
I'm coming back around to the scene on a controller style of art before too long.
Yeah, before too long, there might be new controllers to do it on.
Yeah, no, it's funny. You're absolutely right. Like, who even knows what we're going to be getting on that front? Obviously the rumor mill's going full force, right? And everyone was sure, 100% sure this time 4 weeks ago that the Switch 2 or whatever it is was going to be coming in the next 2 months or whatever. And now everyone's positive that it's been delayed until 2025. And I'm over here just kind of like, I'm continuing my modus operandi of adopting no expectations whatsoever. But I would love to have new looking controllers to draw. I feel like I've done the same old ones enough times,
Yeah, look, with Nintendo, it's better to just have no expectation and see what happens.
Yep, I think that is absolutely true. But and absolutely, thanks for reintroducing yourself, Max. I feel like it's been a long time since we did that, and we should probably give you a space to do that a little bit more often, especially when you're on for the first time at the beginning of a season, right? I know, like in some of the longer ones, we have you on more than once, but you never know. Like the one Spirit Tracks mega fan, like the person who believes that Spirit Tracks is the end all be all of Zelda. They're out there on the internet somewhere, and they tuned into this season, right? They've been searching it. They've been searching the podcatcher for Spirit Tracks podcast, and they found it, and now they know who Max Nichols is.
There you go. That's really it's going to be our biggest season so far. Spirit Tracks.
I have doubts.
No, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
But since it is your first appearance on the show for this season, Max, let's go ahead and talk about Spirit Tracks and your history with it. When you first played it, how you esteem it in the canon of Zelda games, your historical thoughts and feelings on it, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So I hear last episode you had a Spirit Tracks enjoyer and appreciator on.
We did. You're talking, of course, about Connor from Zelda Universe.
Yes. Yep. Well, I am here to balance it out. I am salty about Spirit Tracks. So I played. I played Spirit Tracks the day it came out, and I got. Over the course of, a week or two, I got through and beat the second dungeon. And then I just stopped playing. and I didn't finish it. I didn't go any further because I was not enjoying it back then at the time. And that was coming off of not having finished Phantom Hourglass either, which I also didn't enjoy enough to complete. So I wasn't surprised at the time to find that there was a Zelda game I didn't love. I should have a little bit more of a measured take nowadays. I'm better able to get myself in the head of the people who do like it, and I've actually played way more than I did back then. But a lot of my thoughts about it are really similar to the ones I shared about Phantom Hourglass, right? Like, it's got most of the same pros and cons as far as I'm concerned. I don't like the touchscreen controls, and I don't think it's just that I'm old and not used to them, although that's certainly part of it. There's definitely like a generational element to that. But I just generally find them to be less satisfying, less capable of getting rapid input to do multiple different things at a time, harder to intermix, usage of items and movement, harder to move one way and then swing your sword in the other way. Just like lots of stuff like that, where it's generally just kind of feels like a downgrade compared to the sandbox in other Zelda games. So that's a big part of it. And just like I didn't like the lack of an overworld and the boat experience in Phantom Hourglass, I really loathe the train experience in this game. We can talk more about the details of that later, but I don't like that either. But I do think it has good items and pretty decent dungeons, and there's some things I like about the story. So, I don't know if I would go so far as to say that I would recommend this game to anyone. But I do appreciate that it has some good qualities.
Mm. Yeah, so I want to see what you think about specifically some of the main differences between Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, namely Temple of the Ocean King versus Tower of Spirits, and train versus boat, and some of the main item differences like whip versus like just compare. So and contrast.
I think this is a good spot to talk about some of those generalities, right? Like obviously we'll talk more specifically about like this week's section of the Tower of Spirits and all of that, but it's like this is definitely a perfect time to talk about like why don't you like the train as much as the boat, and for what reasons, stuff like that.
Yeah. Let's see where to begin. I actually have a lot of stuff I want to talk about in regards to the like overworld kind of experience and the train. Let's start with the other parts. So, Tower of the Spirits. Let's see. I mean, it's obviously way better than the Temple of the Ocean King to start off. The simple fact that it's not making you replay stuff and having a time limit where if you lose, you have to start over on the same section you were just playing. Like, the fact that it doesn't have that is an automatic huge, huge win, right? And I know you two agree on that front.
Yes, yeah, no doubt.
We talked a lot about how with Phantom Hourglass, like the purpose of replaying in my mind was to get players to do mastery and essentially do kind of speed run kind of gameplay where they would enjoy the process of pushing themselves to do better each time and unlocking new shortcuts as they came back with new items. Like that was what they were going for. But I don't think they succeeded. And I think that they made the right choice in this one to just pivot away from that goal. I don't think it was a very easy one for them to achieve, and I think they failed in Phantom Hourglass and nobody liked it, and they did the right thing by moving away from that replaying element and just going for there's like novel dungeon floors each time. It's like extra half the dungeon between every other dungeon. I generally still... So that's a big improvement. I'd be lying if I said I still loved it. I'm not caught up on the podcast, so I haven't heard all of your two's impressions, but you two have a lot of fun when you go there each time. Are you enjoying it?
I actually think the Tower of Spirits is the best part of the game. From a week to week standpoint, it has not been a drag at any point, in my opinion. I don't think that it's consistently great, but I think it is at least consistently good and at least consistently engaging. And I like the variety of things that it has you do. I really think that it is a much, much better system than Temple of the Ocean King, outside of the fact that it just did away with the timer and the repeating of floors. I think it's a very good mini dungeon experience overall. Like any one of these chunks of floors, I think you could take out, put it in any Zelda game as a mini dungeon that would get you something like, I don't know, like think about the Ice Cave in Ocarina of Time. I think this would go well in that category of things.
So, and I've actually, and I don't know if I'm at the point where I'm willing to say man, it's been several weeks without me mixing those two things up. I'm at the point where I don't know if I'm ready to say that the Tower of Spirits is my favorite thing in this game, full stop. But I am also enjoying it on the whole. There was 1 week in the middle of the game, the one where where it's all dark, that I really just wasn't a fan of it at all. But overall, I'm liking it well enough. And I actually was thinking about this today. I think one of the reasons is that it's giving me Shrine vibes, like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Like it's scratching a similar itch. And the fact that I do think they managed, we were talking about this a little bit last week, but Matt and I both feel that the buddy mechanic with Phantom Zelda was achieved well in this game. Like it works more or less the way that it's supposed to. It's used in interesting ways that require me to think.
And it's different every week for the most part, or at least moderate.
And it's been getting more difficult.
Yes.
You know, it's been on a good ramp in like difficulty and mechanics and stuff.
That's totally fair. Did you two know that the controlling the Phantom mechanic came from Phantom Hourglass's multiplayer mode?
No. We don't know anything about the multiplayer mode at all.
Yeah, so I never actually played this. I only know it through like YouTube videos and stuff. But Phantom Hourglass has a couple different multiplayer modes. And one of them is like this 4-player, like free-for-all sort of chasing down resources thing. But there's one that's a 1v1 where one player is Link and the other player is controlling all the Phantoms. So 3 Phantoms, I think, in that case, on the touchscreen. And it's like this asymmetrical like multiplayer where one person's doing a strategy game, the other person's playing as Link. Which I don't know anyone who has played that because it's a multiplayer mode in a Zelda game. But apparently the Japanese devs got a lot of feedback that it was cool and people enjoyed it, so they decided to make that a central mechanic in the main game of this one.
I think that was a good idea, personally. Yeah, I think that is one of the more fun aspects of this game.
Yeah, totally. So
I think it's definitely a highlight of the game. I agree.
And so just to sum up, though, like your overall thoughts on the Tower of Spirits as a concept are a little bit more middling, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah. So I generally, I'll start with the simpler of ones, which is I generally feel like it drags a little each time, especially those last 2 or 3 before leading up to this episode. Like I enjoy it for like 3 or 4 floors, and there's always like a 5th and a 6th floor afterwards, and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to feel fatigued. I'm afraid that if I leave and come back or save and quit and then reload, that I must have to start over on this section. I don't actually know if that's true. Maybe I'm just traumatized by Temple of the Ocean King.
Aren't we all, really? Like honestly, at the end of the day,
honestly.
I feel this pressure to complete each visit in a single session.
Yeah.
Which means when it drags on longer than I expect, it can take me by surprise, and I end up staying up till 2 a.m. And the actual kind of mechanics that are going on with Phantom Zelda, I think are kind of intellectually interesting, like as a puzzle thing. It's interesting to figure out how to proceed and what you need to do. But the actual second-to-second action of moving the Phantom around and then also moving Link around and calling the Phantom to you, and then it gets stuck on the walls, and you have to manually bring it to you, and like there's just a lot of busy work, it feels to me, like kind of from a pacing perspective. It feels like it's really frictioned.
Well, and this is the same reason that using a lot of the items I have found to be inherently not necessarily frustrating, but it's friction, like what you're saying, right? Where it's like, just because of the way that things work in this game, where you have to equip an item with a button and then do an action with your touch controls, and like simultaneously trying to stay aware of where Link is on the screen, right? It's like there's several steps between you deciding to do a thing and then executing on doing that thing. Like the whirlwind as an item is a perfect example of this, right? Where it's like, there's like 3 levels of things that you're trying to do with this. And this one has like an extra level of bad because the microphone is involved. But like, it's a similar thing with Phantom Zelda, right? Where it's like, you know what you want to do. Like you can figure it out and you know the way it's supposed to work. And you know, like you can see in your mind, this is what's supposed to happen. But then you've got to like kind of break down and draw the line, right? And then kind of like watch and make sure Zelda doesn't get like stuck on anything, or that she makes it there correctly.
Yeah. Do you remember in the Twilight Princess season, one of the episodes I was on was the Sky City, the name of which I'm forgetting right now. And we talked a lot about how that,
just the city in the sky.
Yeah. We talked a lot about how that dungeon felt like taking a step forward was just like way more effort than it was in any other dungeon in the game, because there's so many slow using items you had to pull out and holes you had to navigate.
Oops, all double claw shots.
And I feel the same way. Yeah. And I feel the same way about the Tower of the Spirits, where it's just like, it's a lot of time and effort to make small steps forward. And of course, stealth gameplay gets old pretty quick, right? And they still have a stealth section at the start of every trip there.
Yeah, to get the Tears of Light.
Yeah, it's much less punishing than it was in Phantom Hourglass, or for that matter, than the getting the Tears of Light in Skyward Sword is, but still there.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's one of those things that we haven't really talked about at all since the first time that it happened in the season. But yeah, it has continued, and it's like, yes, those sections of each week in the Tower of Spirits definitely kind of recall the Temple of the Ocean King vibe a little bit more than things do after Zelda gets into the Phantom Armor every week. But without a timer, and that is important.
Right. The lack of that pressure, which honestly wasn't even that bad, but like you always felt it, makes a big difference. I do still think it's worth stepping back and being like, wow, they set out to make a dungeon-esque experience that somehow felt very different from an actual dungeon, and they succeeded. Like, they succeeded with Temple of the Ocean King and Phantom Hourglass, and even though they took it in a slightly different direction this time around, they still succeeded. Like, this is a very different experience than an actual dungeon is. Like, you have the whole visibility, the whole map at the start. You see these like gameplay elements that are kind of more systemic, which are the, Zelda and the evil phantoms, and they're all on your map, and it's just kind of a very different puzzle solving mode you get into.
Yeah, it's we keep comparing it to co-op Portal. I know it's not the exact same sort of thing, but to me it scratches a similar sort of itch.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison. Okay, I have a fun factoid about the tower.
We really need to have an audio drop for Max Nichols' fun factoids and quotes. Yes.
So here's a quote from Ishii Aonuma, who was the producer.
It's
of the
a
game.
Quote,
and he said, "One of our lead planners for the game is a programmer, so he has a different, more scientific or mathematical approach, so to say, to creating puzzles." And he goes on to say that like long-term Zelda staff members like himself and some other names he drops got really stuck because it was like a different way of thinking about puzzles. And then so it turns out that this is the designer. A planner is essentially the same thing as game designer on the Zelda team. So this was the designer who was responsible for the Tower of the Spirits and all its puzzles. And also, his name is Yohei Fujino, and he happens to also be the designer who did the sand ship and the surrounding desert and ocean desert areas in Skyward Sword.
Oh, what a guy. Love this guy.
The sand ship, notably one of our favorite experiences in Skyward Sword.
If not our top favorite. It was our top favorite, wasn't it?
Buddy, that's been a minute. I've slept
I'm
since
pretty
then.
sure it was our top favorite. Yes.
Like,
I'm going to say that with confidence, and if anyone knows for sure, they can disagree with me.
Someone's going to go listen now.
I mean, please.
Okay.
I'm not going to. But
Okay.
So that was all I had there, but I just thought that was interesting, both that it was a programmer by background and that it's the same person who did, that highlight from Skyward Sword. There were only 3 game designers on this game. I was trying to puzzle out am I going to be able to figure out who they're talking about? Because they didn't name him. And it was easy because there's only 3 people credited as game designers / planners on Spirit Tracks, which is crazy. That means 3 people did all the dungeon design, all the train systems, the items, the enemies. They did all of those things.
It makes me wonder if and this is probably a pretty good segue into the overworld design and the train and all that, but it makes me wonder if the simplicity of traversal with the train might, obviously thematically it makes sense, right? Because a train goes on tracks, right? And so it's inherently more, I guess, regimented of a system than sailing on a boat. But I do wonder if a little bit of that too was just the fact that anything more complex than that would have taxed the resources of this development team.
I actually have another factoid to drop here, which is, I'm not going to actually read the quote. It comes from some interviews, but they actually set out to, when they started this game, they started with the concept of it being a train-based vehicle that you would use in this Zelda game. They spent half of the development time. So this was a 2 years development. They spent the first year of it trying to build a system where the players would lay down the train tracks and be able to choose where the tracks were going to go. And then you would drive on them. And they eventually, they apparently had a lot of trouble with it. Trying to figure out how to make it fun, make it work with the linear story. Obviously I don't know all the details of what they had trouble with, but they had enough trouble with it that halfway through development, Aonuma put down his foot and was like, we're cutting that. You just go on tracks that are already there. So that was a major pivot they made halfway through development.
That's very interesting context.
It's kind of fun to try to imagine what would it have even been like to would have been a very different game in that world.
Do you think it would have been a better game?
I think so. Well, I don't know. They cut it for a reason, right? It wasn't working for them. So I think maybe it would have been a better game if they had found a thing that they were happy with. But obviously that didn't happen, and maybe it would never have happened. Before we jump all the way into my thoughts on the trains, I want to ask you some questions. When you think about iconic stories or experiences involving trains, what comes to mind? In movies or books or whatever.
Blaine is a pain, and that is the truth.
Dark Tower, baby!
Which probably means nothing to 95% of the world.
It's been a long time since I've read those books.
Oh, they're so good. But yes, that's probably not where most people's minds are going to go. I mean, obviously I went, I went immediately to Thomas the Tank Engine.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Okay.
I'm thinking more modern, Bullet Train with Brad Pitt. Excellent movie.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Let me think about this.
Back to the Future, Time Travel Train.
Oh, yeah. Time Travel Train was a good one. I mean, Westerns.
310 to Yuma.
310 to Yuma. There you go. Yeah. Although there wasn't actually a train job in that movie.
No, but they were waiting for the train.
Yeah.
They were waiting for the 310 to Yuma.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
What is a good train heist movie?
Train heist movie. That's a good question.
It happens in Star Wars.
The second episode of Firefly is a train heist show.
Yeah. The beginning of the middle beginning of Solo. There's an attempted train heist.
Yeah, that's true.
one of the things I think of is close the room mysteries on a train, some classic Agatha Christie stuff.
Oh, like Murder on the Orient Express and things like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. You know, and I also think of shootouts on top of trains.
Ooh, yeah.
So, okay, where I'm going with this is I cannot think of any like fantasies that are around driving a train or, you know, traveling via train. It's always about the train as a set piece where you're waiting for a train, or the train is like a hazard that's coming down the trail, the rail, or it's, you know, some story that is taking place on the train. And so I look at this game and I'm like, what were they trying to do with this? Why is driving a train the fantasy they came up with?
Especially versus like other big modes of travel in other Zelda games, right? Like flying, sailing, that kind of thing, you know?
Like pirate ship makes a lot of sense as a fantasy.
Because these things have like much more inherent action, and they have a more direct route of, I don't know, of like control, right? There's much more granularity of control, and I think that speaks to more of a fantasy, right? It's like driving a car, you know? Like there's a reason racing games are fun, you know?
Right. When you drive any other vehicle, you are making choices, right? You're speeding up, you're slowing down, you're turning, you're kind of doing skillful maneuvers, you're deciding where to go, you're navigating, but when you're on a train, the only choices you make are very set binary, like left or right navigation decisions and speed. So my like, I have a lot of issues with Spirit Tracks, but my very biggest one, my highest level problem is just, I feel like a train is fundamentally a wrong direction for a Zelda game to go as a method of travel, because it not only doesn't give me what I like about moving around an overworld in a Zelda game, which is usually like a sense of exploration, a sense of wonder, a sense of surprise. But it like actively fights against those and prevents those things from happening because of the nature of only being able to go down set paths, and not being able to do much gameplay while you're doing it.
Yeah.
No, that's totally fair. And being set like that, and even like I can imagine someone saying like, well, you can get force gems that allow you to explore a new area. Yes, but then you're signposted to that being a new area. It's not a sense of wonder of, oh, what is that over there? It's, oh, I opened up a new thing, now I need to go look at it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like even when you're opening up new areas of the world to explore, you're still being immediately shown where those areas are. And it's not where you are right that second, right? It's like you cut to the map and it's like, here's this secret area, you know?
All the way over there on the other side of the map. Go spend 15 minutes chewing your way over there. I'm like, no, I don't think I will. Yeah. Thank you.
It's so like, if I think about what makes exploration fun, you know, I spend a lot of my career thinking about that because I feel like a lot of games struggle with this, but you know, it's stuff like, is there some things that will surprise you, right? Like, are you going to turn a corner or investigate something that you're curious about and be surprised by what you find? Whether it's an item or a beautiful vista or whatever it may be, simply being surprised is really important. And then the other one is that, like, even if you're not surprised, like coming across things for the first time, it being something novel or interesting or awe-inspiring or beautiful, like there needs to be some property of the things that you're finding that leaves an impression on you and is memorable to you. And so that's a question of execution, right? You could give those kind of moments even while traveling on a train. But I don't think this game succeeds at that. Pretty much no point in this game am I ever like amazed at what I'm finding or encountering while I'm on the train.
I think the one time that I looked afar from the train and was like, oh, what is that over there? I want to know what that is. Was the week we were putting around the ocean realm and you could see the sand temple from the rails on the ocean. I was like, oh, that looks like a freaking ziggurat, like Muto's temple. Like, I want to go over there and see what that is. And I was like, oh, I mean, that's probably something I'm going to get railroaded into at some point. Like, that was literally the only time that I've been like, I want to go investigate.
Well, that's because at that point in the game, you had played enough Spirit Tracks to know that it wasn't that kind of game. Like, right. It's not the kind of game where if you see something that looks interesting, you should go see if you can get there right now. Because one, immediately you can tell whether or not there are tracks leading to it. Right.
Yep.
But also, this is not a game that is rewarding you at all for going out of the way of what you're currently trying to achieve. You know?
Right. Yeah. Agree completely.
Yeah. I guess I should take it back a little bit. There was a couple times where I was intrigued by things that I saw or as I was moving around. The big one was the first time I went underwater in the water area. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is what I wish every area was like in terms of it, like showing me something I haven't experienced before while I'm wandering around on my train. And then the other one was I kept passing the pirate island, which maybe we'll talk about more, in the ocean area, and seeing that there's a fortress there. Like, how do I get there? And then like trying to interact with it and not having a way to do it. And that became like a goalpost in my head later on. I was like, I want to find the side quest that gets me access to this place. So those are the two examples I have, that I wish they had found a way to get those feelings throughout more of the overworld.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I knew that this was going to be a big sticking point for you specifically, because I know that, you know, we've talked in the past on this show about how a lot of people come to Zelda games for a lot of different reasons and keep coming back to them for different reasons. And like Matt's and my lists are even kind of a little different from each other's, right?
For sure.
You know, things like combat, puzzle solving, story, exploration, art, music, whatever. And I know that exploration and a sense of wonder is really the big one for you, Max. And so I knew that this was going to be definitely an issue for you, and I completely understand why. And even though pure exploration and getting lost in the world isn't my number one most thing that I look for in a Zelda game, its absence is definitely one of the reasons that I feel that this game is not really... It just doesn't have a lot of soul, I guess is how I would describe it. It doesn't have a lot of that Zelda magic, which is kind of an intangible quality, but yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels intangible, but I do think we can drill in on it a little bit because I feel the same way.
Do we want to move that to our takes, or do we want to keep doing it?
No. This is just general.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue, please.
Yeah. I could go on this forever, so we should cut me off at some point. But I think a lot of this game was built around the expectation that moving around on the train was going to be a lot of fun. Inherently, right?
Yeah.
Like they designed all of their side quests around it. They designed one of the most restrictive fast travel methods in the whole series, in favor of you using the train more. They have all these set piece moments where you're doing gameplay on trains and fighting bosses on trains. And the problem is it's not fun. So it kind of, all this scaffolding, it was like a weight bearing part of the game where all these other experiences, in order to be enjoyable, the train had to be enjoyable. So for me, at least, all of those other experiences fall apart, and also are not fun or enjoyable because the train has these problems.
Yeah. Yep, that's the popular consensus. Connor presented a few counter arguments to that last week, but it's still the way that I feel, and I know still the way that Matt feels. So, yeah, and I think that there's a very good reason it hasn't been done again since this point.
Part of what's interesting about it to me is it's on rails gameplay is a tried and true thing, right? There are lots of games that take place on rails that are fun. You know, whether we're talking about Star Fox or Time Crisis or, I don't know, Panzer Dragoon, Pokemon Snap. Like, these are all games where you're literally on a track, basically. And yet they all have fun gameplay. So it's possible to have fun gameplay on a train that's on a track. But they just didn't get there.
Yeah. I totally agree. And for me, it's one of those things where it's like, I have said this whole season that I don't out and out hate train traversal. I definitely don't love it, but it's just something that I'm kind of like putting up with. It's something that is, it's unfun to me. But it's no less of a downer than sailing the boat was in Phantom Hourglass for me. Like, I still maintain that I like this a little bit better than sailing the boat, simply because there's just like a little bit less thinking for me to do. And so I can just kind of twiddle my thumbs through it a bit more passively than I could sailing the boat, which is very, very, very faint praise. I'm damning with faint praise right now. But that's still kind of where I'm at with it. But yeah, it's like I just really think that there's something very inherent about like there was an attempt to create an overworld here, and it was a failed attempt, right?
Yeah. Like one of the things that you bring to the podcast a lot, Max, is talking about the overworld or the world as a character. And I don't feel like this overworld is a character in any way, shape, or form. It's just it's literally a map that you draw on and ride through. There's no.
It's almost more of a menu than anything else. Right?
Really, honestly, yeah. It's rough.
Yeah. So
I genuinely feel like the overworld in like Zelda 2 has more personality and mystery to
I agree. Again, I stand by my ranking of Zelda 2 better than Phantom Hourglass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I regret the way I voted for that.
I get more people on my side. Yeah.
Who would have known that the ranking of Zelda 2 was going to be one of our continuing sources of regret as we go further and further into this podcast?
I regret nothing because I was right.
You were right.
Yes.
So I remember back in, I don't know, what was this, 2009, when this came out? I remember feeling really mad at the Zelda team for the fact that they kept missing what was most important about Zelda to me, which is exploring the world. Like, they didn't really do it in Phantom Hourglass. They did it even less in this one. And then, of course, the one after this was Skyward Sword, which also had essentially one step up from a menu. At least it wasn't as long and drawn out as the train is.
But to your point, real quick before you go on, we're talking about those opportunities to create an impression and to create a sense of wonder around, like coming around a corner and seeing something that leaves an impression on you. At least Skyward Sword's overworld was capable of doing that,
Yeah. I can agree with that. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So I back in the day when I was a kid in 2009, I was mad about it. But thinking back now with the benefit of all our discussions and my game design and knowledge and stuff, this entire era of Zelda to me looks like Nintendo trying to find a path forward after the failure of Twilight Princess's overworld.
That's fair.
And you think the Zelda team did see Twilight Princess's overworld as a failure?
I think so. I don't have quotes to that effect. But I do think that they probably do view it as a failure. In fact, I think they probably view the Wind Waker as a bit of a failed experiment as well, because they didn't really figure out how to solve the whole like balancing items that unlock access to stuff versus freedom problem. Like, was very fraught in the Wind Waker.
I would agree with that sentiment.
Yeah. But in any case, Twilight Princess, nobody really liked the overworld. It felt kind of vestigial. It was like, why is this even here? There's nothing interesting here. We're not having fun in the overworld. It feels like a waste of time. So what I think happened was they took a step back and were like, okay, overworld's not working. What do we do instead? And so they were like, okay, vehicles. We're going to have you have a kind of a menu-based, vehicle-based thing in Phantom Hourglass. And then they must have thought it was at least good enough there that they were willing to double down on it here. And then they got to Skyward Sword, And there are interviews where they talk about how their original plan was to literally have a menu, like a Mario Overworld selection screen, basically. And they eventually, they gave us the sky-based travel that it actually had, but it was essentially kind of just a nothing sandwich. So they went down this path of like reducing the presence of overworld experience more and more for like a decade, until Link Between Worlds came around and they brought back overworld experiences.
Yeah, which is an undisputed strength, right? And then, which is weird because like that return to a classic overworld experience became the gateway towards like the mother of all overworld experiences in Zelda games, which is Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I do think we probably need to wind this discussion down and get into the main body of the episode, Max. But if you want to close it out with if you had one other observation or something in the locked and ready to go, then feel free to let it off the chain.
My last thought is I do think trains are cool and have a place in Zelda settings. I just don't want to drive them. I want to lay down tracks and I want to save people that are on the tracks and I want to shoot arrows at enemies that are driving by on a train. I'm getting back to the thing I've said before, which I think Zelda would make a good Western.
Yep.
Hey, I think that there's a lot of potential there, and I think it would have been, just to piggyback on that before we get into the big actual chunk of the episode, that would have been a really cool thing to be able to connect all of the towns in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom via a rail system like that.
Oh,
you're
man.
Like, it basically turned into like a civilization builder. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
Man, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm going to drop that one there and then we can move on.
You should learn Japanese and then go work for Nintendo.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, and real quick before we get out of this section, Max, Spirit Tracks, I know you said you just don't love these kinds of games. Fair to say that Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks are at the bottom of your Zelda list. Do you prefer one over the other?
So it's a good question. I was definitely, if you'd asked me before this section, I would have said, yeah, Phantom Hourglass easily comes out on top. But after this section, which I thought was very good, I'm uncertain. So Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and Adventure of Link are kind of battling out to see what order they're in the bottom of my list.
Okay. Well, we can't wait to catch up with where you land with that, because I know, speaking for myself, I haven't necessarily decided either. So that's going to be a fun thing to break down here in a few weeks.
Well, it's fun that we have a rank and recap episode.
It is. So I guess we'll be talking about that with the detective, assuming that he gets the game finished in time. And if not, we might have to call Max Nichols in for an emergency appearance on another rank and recap.
I will have very different voting than the detective, I think, which will be hilarious.
I think that's probably true. But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different day. Let's go ahead and get into the housekeeping and then jump into this episode. Real quick before the housekeeping, Matt, you know what we got to do.
Whiskey Bit.
Whiskey Bit.
Yay.
Love Whiskey Bit.
You get to do Whiskey Bit tonight because you supplied.
I get to do Whiskey Bit tonight because he who brings the whiskey does the bit. That's the rule that we have in this house.
It's a good rule.
Yep. So we've actually had this one on the show before, Matt. It's Jack Daniel's Bonded, which, for anyone who doesn't remember, because most people don't even care, but we care. Jack Daniel's Bonded is a 100 proof Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey. It's not the Rego Jack Daniel's that you see behind bars all over the country. It's not much more expensive than that. This is a 1 liter bottle and it's about $32. And for my money, it's about the best $32 that you could spend on a whiskey.
It's seriously up
fantastic.
There. And easy to find everywhere, unlike a lot of other allocated things.
Oh, 100%. 100 proof is an excellent place to keep a whiskey in my mind. Not too spicy, but it's also not, it's got a little body to it, which I appreciate. But as with all Jack Daniel's whiskey, people say that it has an undertone of banana flavor, very subtle banana flavor, which I do definitely get from this one. Just a reminder that the term bonded, also bottled in bond, refers to a very specific kind of whiskey making process, but it always is bottled at 100 proof. Any bottled in bond whiskey you ever see is going to be 100 proof. So anyway, Jack Daniel's Bonded Tennessee whiskey. Here's to Jack, Matt.
Here's to Jack and Jackson, just because the similarity in names. That's the only reason.
Yeah. Well, and both whiskiesmen, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So good. Always good.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's absolutely delicious. Holy crap. Woo. And I love that you can buy it in like a liter as well. Like most whiskey comes in either 500, 750, or 1 liter.
1.75.
Right? Or 1.75 is a handle, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so getting this at that 1 liter at that price is just very nice. I always feel like I'm getting a lot of bang for my buck out of one of these bottles.
No doubt.
Alrighty. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Naughty Nexus, Freddy, Brandon, Shrikewill, Joseph, Nick Tendo, Adam, Sakuras, Sky, Art, Jeremy, Dante, Tom, Andy, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Tiffany the Star, Patrice, Stephanie, Il Maestro himself, Darknuck, who released a new track on Spotify just today. It's a cover of the Beneath Hyrule Castle theme from Tears of the Kingdom, and it's great.
It's very Stranger Things.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Lennon, Kolku, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante 1, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru, the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Daniel, Nick D _TV, Maximum Nichols, aka our guest of the evening, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and I would journey into a desert ziggurat with any of them any day of the week.
Absolutely, that sounds amazingly fun. Let's Indiana Jones this bish.
But without further ado, let's talk about what we played this week. And my heart's still racing over here because for everyone listening...
Behind the scenes pod here.
We just had an internet drop, which resulted in Zencastr telling us that it had 0 of the last hour of audio that we have recorded. All that great discussion. We thought we'd lost it forever. Zencastr was able to pull a backup from somewhere. I don't know how it all works. It's wizardry of a kind that I've never experienced before.
But we're thankful for the wizardry.
But we have the audio.
Thank the wizard.
Okay. Woo, man. I'm going to need an extra pour of Jack Daniel's Bonded before this is all over, Matt. But without further ado, let's talk about what we played this week. We do that every week in the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today we are talking about Spirit Tracks, Chapter 5, dealing primarily with the desert region and the Sand Temple. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is, as always, the plot recap, this week read by Matt.
Nope, you.
You're doing this one, I'm doing the finale.
You're doing this one, I'm doing the finale.
You want to do the finale?
Yes.
Okay. This week read by myself.
Take it away, Lyndon.
With the fire temple safely behind us, we hop back aboard the spirit train to choo-choo our way back to the newly restored Tower of Spirits and halt the evil plans of Chancellor Cole, and hopefully prevent the return of Malladus, saving Angine along the way. The steep downhill grade of the mountainous fire realm speeds us on our way, and it isn't long before the spirit train is docked back in its berth, and we're ascending the massive spiral staircase inside the Tower of Spirits. Finally arriving at the topmost landing, taking a deep breath, we proceed through the door into what we are sure will be another phantom-infested gauntlet. And sure enough, it isn't long before we hear the clank of phantom armor around a nearby corner. A stealthy glance from around the safety of a wall tells us that this variety of phantom is different than any we have previously encountered. They're broad and clad in black armor, and when one catches sight of us, it rolls into an immense wrecking ball and tries to chase us down and flatten us. While incredibly dangerous, we quickly notice that some quick footwork can trick the wrecker phantoms into colliding with rocks and boulders, inadvertently clearing pathways for us within the Tower of Spirits. After sneakily collecting 3 tiers of light, we seize the opportunity to disable one of these rolling monsters and let Zelda inhabit its armor. Under Zelda's control, the Wrecker Phantom is an offensive force to be reckoned with, able to deal crushing blows to enemies and obstacles alike. The winding corridors of the top floor of the tower are longer and more convoluted than any we have visited previously, some of which are filled with lava and all of which have brain-twisting puzzles for us to solve. It becomes necessary for us to move Zelda between various phantoms in order for us to solve all of the puzzles before us. Finally, after a grueling chamber where we managed to steal a big key from a pack of floor masters, we come through a large door and into what appears to be the top room of the Tower of Spirits. A towering amber window casts an orange light over an arena situated in the center of the room, and out of the shadows a sneering voice calls to us. Burn is here, and he taunts us with the knowledge that the revival of Malladus in Zelda's body is almost complete. Malladus has almost returned, and I will eliminate anyone who gets in my way, the fallen Lokomo says to us. We know that the time is precious, but we can't progress any further while Burn stands in our way, and so we do battle with the gauntleted fiend. Burn is fast and aggressive, jumping around the edges of the arena and firing evil energy at us. Eventually, Burn starts using his metal gauntlet as a ranged attack, and with a quick dodge out of the way, we avoid the hand which gets stuck in the ground. Phantom Zelda is strong enough to pull Burn down off of the arena walls with the cable connected to the gauntlet, and we take this opportunity to deliver several blows with our sword to the enemy. Catching onto our strategy, Burn comes into the arena itself and tries to attack us more directly, but the team of Zelda and Link provides too much for him to overcome, and Zelda is able to grab him and hold him in place while we deliver more sword blows. Before long, Burn has had enough, and he lays defeated at our feet. Link and Zelda, elated by the feat they have accomplished using the power of friendship, enjoy a self-congratulatory moment and a quick high five. Unfortunately, this momentary celebration has given Burn an opportunity to escape the room through a crack in the amber window, and we give chase, following him outside onto a balcony leading to the roof of the tower. We can see the whole of New Hyrule laid out underneath of us, but more immediately important is the scene which greets us at the top of the stairs. The body of Zelda floats in midair, locked into a nefarious ritual which Chancellor Cole is performing. We are too late, and the evil spirit of Malladus has taken hold of Zelda. Her eyes open, and we see not the beautiful eyes of the Princess of Hyrule, but the mad yellow and red eyes of the Demon King. It appears that Malladus is still attempting to get comfortable in his new form, and Burn takes the opportunity to make a request on bended knee to Malladus, that he be granted ultimate power and become stronger than any Lokomo before him. Cole sneers at Burn and mocks him for being unable to defeat us. He asks Malladus to make a sacrifice of Burn and ourselves as a show of his new power. Malladus strikes Burn down with a bolt of evil energy, and Burn falls, a look of betrayed shock on his face. A cackling Cole turns and boards a monolithic flying train car with his resurrected king. The demon train flies off with our enemies, and we are unable to give chase. We hear soft footsteps behind us and turn to see Angine, weak and injured but still alive, climbing the steps. She proclaims that even though the Demon King's return is calamitous, all is not lost and there may yet be a way forward. We follow Angine back to the spirit train and have counsel, and take the unconscious Burn with us. Angine knows of an artifact which may be powerful enough to defeat the Demon King, the Bow of Light, which has the mystical ability to pierce evil. The bow has been sealed for generations inside of the Sand Temple, and retrieving it will be no easy task, but we must try, or else the evil of Malladus could engulf the world. Angine gifts us with a force gem that illuminates a new network of spirit tracks in the ocean realm, and without further ado, we head to the southwest to seek out the Sand Temple. The newly revealed spirit tracks take us into the very heart of the desert, an inhospitable wasteland dotted with immense statues and hostile sand sharks. We know that we have to seek out the Lokomo Guardian of the Sand Realm in order to complete the tracks that lead to the Sand Temple, but when we arrive at what we believe to be the Sand Sanctuary, no one waits for us there. Instead, all we see are a few cryptic signs instructing us to more closely observe the statues that stand in the heart of the desert, paying special attention to where their gazes intersect. We hop back on the spirit train and take a tour of the Sand Realm, marking the directions of the statue's gaze on our map. Coming back to the Sand Sanctuary, we notice that the pathways are laid out in the same arrangement as the tracks of the Sand Realm, and if we go to the area of the floor which is analogous to the point where the statue's gaze intersects on our map, we might find something. We drop a bomb on this point, and sure enough, a previously hidden stairway appears and beckons us into an underground chamber. In this chamber, we discover another Lokomo, this one a jovial old man by the name of Rael. He is happy to teach us his closely guarded Lokomo tune, which he plays in duet on his flute after we have had a moment to practice. The duet successfully awakens another run of spirit tracks, though Rael warns us that we must face 3 challenges before arriving at the Sand Temple: a big eye looming in the shadows, the twisted tunnels, and finally the impenetrable temple itself. We board the spirit train once again and head out onto the newly revealed tracks. The path takes us first to a dark cavern, and it's no secret what Rael meant when he referred to the looming eye in the dark. A highly aggressive Rocktite begins to give chase after us in the tunnel, and only by shooting its massive eye with our cannon are we able to damage it, also helped along by some handy explosive barrels that line the walls of the tunnel. With the Rocktite defeated, we emerge back into the sunlight, knowing that another challenge awaits us. Sure enough, we learn quickly that the tracks ahead do not go forward as straight as they would appear. Going through a tunnel doesn't bring us in the direction we appear to have been heading, instead sending us back to the beginning of the puzzle. We try to conquer this labyrinth several more times, taking detailed notes of which directions send us forward and which ones send us back to the beginning. Eventually, we figure out the correct pattern and emerge on the other side of the desert mountain range, with the Sand Temple close at hand. As we approach, however, we notice that the temple is festooned with ballistic turrets, which open fire on us immediately. We circle round and round the immense pyramid to get eyes on the massive door, which must lead to its interior. We have a hunch that the temple may need to be cleared of its armament before we can proceed, and so we begin a fierce volley of our own back at the turrets. While the guns are numerous, they are far from invincible, and several well-placed shots each render them inoperative and open the door of the temple to us. Docking in the berth which leads to the temple interior, we get a whiff of ancient still air and dust. The inside of the temple is a sandy labyrinth of corridors filled with spike traps and a few catapult objects, which we have no current way to activate. Trying to navigate the temple is difficult and requires us to dodge rolling boulders and packs of highly aggressive Stalfos. In an inner chamber, we encounter a group of 3 master Stalfos who are even more murderous than their weaker counterparts. Using our bombs and a series of swift sword slashes, we defeat them, and a chest is revealed to us. The chest contains the sand rod, which can create pillars of sand at our very feet and allow us to reach higher points in a room, or fashion barriers for defense. Having the sand rod allows us to push further into the temple and gives us a way to roll boulders onto the catapult devices we saw earlier, which can be activated to blast objects out of our way. The rest of the temple is light on enemies, but some of the tricks and traps put our powers of problem solving to the ultimate test. Finally, we find ourselves standing in front of the massive boss chamber door and walk inside. The cavernous room before us is home to a circular sand pit with a giant helmeted skull in its center. As we walk forward, the skull comes alive, its eyes glowing a malevolent red. The ancient demon Skeldritch begins a battle by shooting massive boulders out of its armored body at us, and we can see no easy way to damage this foe. Looking around the arena, we see that 4 of the catapults from earlier in the dungeon are here, and we wonder if the boulders that Skeldritch is shooting at us might work as ammunition against the monster. Sure enough, Using the sand rod, we are able to roll a boulder onto a catapult and launch it at Skeldritch, destroying one of its exposed vertebrae. We try to repeat this process several more times, but it gets more and more difficult as Skeldritch starts firing boulders at us with greater speed and also adds lethal laser beams into the mix. Finally, we destroy the last vertebrae, and the skull of Skeldritch begins chasing us around the arena. Using the sand rod, we are able to gain elevation against Skeldritch and deal blows to the red gem seated in the middle of its crown. This, finally, is too much for the ancient monster, and it crumbles to dust. With Skeldritch dead, a passageway opens to a lower crypt, where at the end of a stone stairway, a chest lies. We open the chest and are presented with the magnificent Bow of Light, a golden wonder meticulously crafted and clearly lethal. We have come so far on our journey, and even though the threat of Malladus is more present now than ever, maybe, just maybe, this gilded bow holds the key that we need to defeat the Demon King and restore peace to New Hyrule.
Well done, as always, Lyndon. For those of you who are listening in, Lyndon doesn't do it super often, but when he does a great job. And since we're double stacking episodes this week, one today and one tomorrow, helps me out a lot that you took one for the team this time. So I appreciate your stepping up to the plate.
You know what? I'm happy to do what I can. I like to believe that I can plot with the best of them when the opportunity arises.
I think you do, and as the main plotsman, I think I'm the only one who can say that. So there you go.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Good
All
job.
right. Let's go ahead and get into part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. Max, you mentioned in the run-up to all of this that something about this week and the stuff that we played was turning your opinion on this whole game. And so I feel like it's really only fair to start with you and to say and to just ask the question, what was it about this week that has you feel in some kind of way?
Yeah. Several different things clicked at the same time for me, I think. The easy ones are that I think this was the best dungeon and the best boss and the best item in the game so far. So having all those kind of land at once was quite the hammer blow in favor of the quality of the game on this section. And in addition, there was actually some kind of somewhat interesting story development by the standards of the rest of the game, at least. And I also enjoyed the actual process of getting to and finding the temple. And last but not least, this was the more or less the first time that like the fun of the side quests really clicked with me. So it was kind of just a lot of that stuff coming together at the same time for me that made this section kind of tip the scales from this is the worst Zelda game ever made to this might not be the first Zelda game ever made.
I mean, that's an impressive amount of work in 1 week's worth of material to bring you around to that extent. So like that can't be ignored. That's awesome. So a lot of those things are stuff that we're going to talk about in the direct lead up to the dungeon and then the discussion of the dungeon itself. Let's go ahead and because we've been doing this in order of the things that we play, let's talk about this week's offering in the Tower of the Spirits real quick. Because I think, in my opinion, this was another pretty strong week for the Tower of Spirits as a concept. But I was definitely kind of starting to feel a little bit of the drag that you were mentioning earlier, Max, where it's like I was having a lot of fun with it for the first, 3 floors. And then it kind of seemed like it went going. It went 1 floor longer than I really was wanting it to. That was definitely true for me this week.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. So, but only to an extent. I think one thing that really worked for me this week in the Tower of Spirits was switching your Phantom loadout. So going from the roller Phantom or the Wrecker Phantom. Yeah, the Wrecker Phantom back into the regular Phantom was kind of cool, and I'm kind of glad that they did that. It was a neat little mix up to the normal formula, and you got to do some cool things with the Wrecker Phantom. And then when it wasn't working anymore, it was just like, hey, go and be in a different one. And like, I thought that was really cool. The fight scene with the like 4 or 5 Zolas and the Wrecker Phantom Zelda and Link running around.
How great was that?
That was so much fun.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I really, really liked that one. Basically, like Link over there being the bait and then Zelda just rolling into all of them and just kind of crushing them to death was super cool. Did you know, by the way, this actually made the fight a little bit easier. You can de-shield Zolas with the whip.
With the whip, yeah.
Yeah, so like I did that for a couple of them. Like, it was really, really fun. Like that was frantic and hectic, and it had a cool little environment that Link could run around and hide behind blocks to keep the Zolas trapped. I thought all of that worked really, really well. And I think this was probably the strongest Tower of Spirits run through leading up into the burn fight. Like, I really, really enjoyed this section. I never got bored with it.
Max, do you think the Wrecker Phantom is the best Phantom variant that we've had control of so far?
Yes. I think it's the most tactile, right? Like it does a thing in a way that is more like immediate and in your face and obvious than the other ones do.
And it destroys stuff.
It kind of felt like it has a special ability, and a lot of the other ones also have special abilities, but they're like less flashy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's kind of funny because like the fact that a component of the Tower of Spirits is that each week we've been kind of getting a new Phantom. Like, I know we've talked about the mechanics of them, but I don't think we've taken a moment to say that this is just a pretty cool extra layer on top of the Tower of Spirits experience, which is that every week you can kind of expect to be dealing with a new Zelda character within those floors, right? Like, just on paper, I think that that's a really cool extra addition to this whole system. And this week it really came to a head with the Wrecker Phantom, which I agree, Max. I thought that this one was just a ton of fun. As soon as I realized what we were getting and what you could do with it, this kind of kicked into high gear for me. And I was just like, I'm having a really, really good time with this now. I will say that the whole process of getting the Tears of Light this week, took a little bit longer.
I could have done without the big block puzzle.
Yeah. The big block puzzle where you're having to like slowly move a bunch of things around, right? That definitely kind of took a little bit longer than I would have enjoyed. But yeah, it felt like in order to get to taking control of the Phantom just took a lot longer this week than it has. And it's still fine, right? Like, it's not like I hated it or didn't enjoy it or whatever, but it was just like, okay, that you could have shaved that just a little bit and this would have been like, get me to the action, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that it did well in addition to the Wrecker Phantom was when you switched to regular Phantom Zelda, it did a cool thing where it built on the puzzles from the Fire Temple, where you have to then use Phantom Zelda to go hold up one of the arrow redirectors, move her to a different spot, maneuver Link over to where he can shoot the two things at the same time. So it does a cool thing. The Tower of Spirits so far has done a cool thing where it takes the puzzles from the previous dungeon and iterates on them to a slightly different, more difficult stage.
So I agree with you. Here's my thing. A lot of this was a little frustrating for me, especially the part you're mentioning right now where you have to get the little arrow drones, right, and align them and position them using Phantom Zelda and all that.
Yeah.
It was fun and a good puzzle on paper. The reason that it frustrated me a little bit is because I didn't have a good intrinsic understanding of what all I could do with Phantom Zelda. Mm-hmm. Like, so for instance, one of these puzzles requires Zelda to pick up the arrow drone and then hold it while you go off and shoot it.
And you
right?
didn't know that Zelda could pick up the arrow.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't either. And I was frustrated by that until I figured it out. And then when I had the eureka moment, I was like, oh, that's clever. And like, so it hit me good for that reason that it's hitting you bad, which is not normal. Normally the things that hit you good hit me bad. So like, it's kind of interesting that we're having the reverse experience.
It's good to shake it up.
Yeah. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the eureka moment there.
Yeah.
You know that Aonuma quote I read earlier about the designer who used to be a programmer?
Yes.
The one that we still have the audio for, yes.
Yes. That puzzle in particular was where I was like, oh, I think I may be starting to understand what Aonuma meant about this guy designing puzzles that were more mathematical. or scientific, because that was a very like, you need to chain some arrows along long lengths of area, and there's multiple like height adjustments that have to happen, and you need to figure out how to get the arrow turret repeaters at the right height, held by the right thing. Like, it's just like all these elements have to line up to like balance out the equation of the different heights. So that to me is the biggest example of that kind of different puzzle design. I was also very frustrated by it. I'm a little bit more on Lyndon's side there.
Yeah, that's funny. And it actually, I think, kind of makes sense to our different personalities, right? Like, you and Lyndon are both kind of more creative types. I'm much more analytical in the way that I just approach things and the way my brain works and the way like I just operate. So I think that does make a little bit of sense why I would find enjoyment in that type of puzzle and y'all might not. I don't know, maybe I'm just diving into some psychoanalysis there, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
For me, part of it was what Lyndon mentioned, where he didn't have a good understanding of all the options in front of him. But I also had trouble reading the relative heights. Like, this is a place where maybe the 3D slider would have helped me if this was a 3DS game instead of a DS game.
That's fair.
So it's so funny that we're talking about this now, because this was going to be a big observation for me in the dungeon this week. But it also definitely applies here, right? Like, I continue to have instances in this game where it's not immediately clear to me that I'm dealing with more than one level of elevation, you know? And this game likes doing those sorts of puzzles. It's been happening quite a lot. And I don't hate that in and of itself. I think that's like, as an idea, that's cool. Like, that's a thing that could work really well. It adds a fun level of complexity. It literally is just down to how well can you tell the difference between those things when you're looking at the screen. And the answer to that question is not always really a lot.
So that's fair.
Yeah. But yeah. And then lack of education around the full suite of like movements and abilities and stuff that you can do in here was definitely a part of it too.
How quickly did you two realize how to get Zelda put down the repeater?
That is actually the part that annoyed me the most, because I left and came back the first time because I didn't do the sequence correctly, where I didn't get Link up to the platform before I had Zelda pick up the repeater. And so I left and came back. And then the second time when I actually got it right, I was like, well, what if I just go make her grab a boulder? And that worked.
So I did it on accident. I couldn't figure out what the hell to do. And so as a last ditch effort, I decided to just get Zelda and I on the same platform, right? I whipped back across and got on that up stairwell and got her up there as well, still holding the arrow node thing. And I accidentally swiped my sword, and she was standing right next to me, and she dropped the item. She drops it when you hit her with your sword.
Oh, I made her go grab a boulder.
Oh, okay.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So
yeah, there definitely could have been some more education.
Totally on accident. So obviously we've had a lot of different fun new experiences in the Tower of Spirits this week. It's been a really great evolution of all the things that we've done prior. And like we have said, it's been a pretty great overall time. One extra thing that's new this week that we haven't had before is a boss fight.
Yeah, no, this was really fun. I mean, technically, I think they counted the Zolas as boss fights in previous weeks, but this one is a real boss fight.
Well, and I think it's funny, too, because it's like narratively, as you're getting ready to go and do this, the way that it's being set up is like you're about to go beat the game, right? And we know that that's not true. You know, like we know that you and I know that we have got another dungeon to do,
right?
And then a finale section, you know. But from the perspective of the people in the game, the characters in the game, we've gotten all the force gems in the temples. We've reassembled the whole tower. It's time to go stop Malladus from being reborn, right?
And possessing Zelda's body, yes.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, doesn't work.
Yeah. It was really fun, and I really liked having to fight Burn. Like, I liked that they kind of had him started up as a bad guy at the beginning. Then he had his little showdown with Angine last week, and now we get to fight him. And like, that was really good. I thought that was good.
I'm a little confused about this. Angine, I guess, is just totally fine. Like nothing happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I'm assuming it was kind of an Obi-Wan Anakin situation, except Burn didn't end up losing all of his limbs and getting burned in a volcano. He just kind of escaped Angine instead of, losing the duel.
Well, Angine said something about how she couldn't take care of him or she couldn't handle him or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So maybe he just let her get away or something. I don't know.
Importantly, Angine is totally fine. But,
yes, importantly.
Yeah. But before we figure that out, it's time to actually do battle with Burn. How did you feel about this little mini boss fight experience, Max?
I freaking hated it.
Really?
Wow.
Now part of it might be that I was exhausted. It was like 1:30 a.m. when I was doing this fight, but so I did the first couple beats of the fight just fine, right? Like I wrestled with the Zelda Phantom controls, got her to grapple with him, and then I could go in and hit him with the sword. And then it got like a little harder or faster or something, and I couldn't get it to trigger anymore. I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to get Zelda to grapple with Burn. I went up and I looked up YouTube videos. I tried for a while. I went through 2 health potions, trying, failing. And I was pretty sure it was just timing luck. Like I must have been missing something. I kind of blundered through it eventually. I feel like I just got lucky and finally got her to grapple with him again, and then I was able to beat him. But that was a pretty bad experience for me.
Yeah, I think the thing for me, I didn't have nearly as much trouble as you did, Max. But I also didn't necessarily have a great idea of what exactly I was supposed to do at any point. I just kind of like stumbled into the correct solutions, is sort of how it happened, which is a shame because I want the mechanics of a boss fight to be evident with observation, right? Which is something that we're going to talk about when we get into the dungeon, right? But for this one, what we had was a pretty cool setting, right? Like we have a cool character in Burn who we wanted to know a little bit more about. And we have what is essentially a wrestling ring here.
Yeah, WWE, baby.
Right, where he's like, where he's ready to do like a flying tackle at any moment.
He's going full rock on us.
Yeah, exactly.
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh yeah, to bring the elbow down off the side post, Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I totally get where you guys are coming from, and I think it's fair. I definitely didn't find the mechanics of this really intuitive outside of, I think in the first phase when he's just throwing his gauntlet at you to try to grab you and he misses, Zelda says something like, I'll grab his gauntlet, and then like yanks him down. The second phase when she's supposed to grapple with him, like there was no way to figure that out really. I got really lucky and happened to like dodge behind Zelda and she grabbed him and I was like, oh, cool. So every time he started doing his little charge up thing, I just ran and hid behind Phantom Zelda until he charged and she grabbed him every time. Like I just got right behind her. I didn't make her move at all. And that seemed to work really well for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there has been some education within the game up until this point about when to use Zelda Phantom as a distraction, and then you go in for the attack on the back end, right? But again, like some of these things are kind of gummy, and there was never like I think this is one of those things where a lot of Zelda games would have a more clearly defined tutorial around mechanics like this, right? Even if it's not as explicitly outlined as a tutorial section in the way that a lot of games would do it, I think a lot of other Zelda games are very good at education around this kind of mechanic, where Spirit Tracks just kind of leaves it up to you to sort of figure it out, right? Because I think, Max, your confusion around this whole thing is very telling, right? Especially you being a person who has not only played a lot of Zelda games, but like critically breaks down gameplay choices and design choices in Zelda games from an academic standpoint, right? Like the fact that this wasn't clear to you is concerning.
Yeah, I mean, even I'm guilty of. You ever have that thing where you hear someone's name wrong the first time, and then like forevermore, even after being corrected 100 times, you like your first instinct is to use that first name that was wrong.
Yeah.
Weird example, but basically that could happen to me with like gameplay, like interpretation as well. Like if I get if for something, some streams cross in such a way that I think that I know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm just having trouble executing on that thing, then I don't necessarily reevaluate and step back and be like, oh wait, actually I'm trying to do the wrong thing. I just am like, oh, I'm failing to do the right thing, is where I get stuck. And it sounds like that may have happened this time, because I definitely was confident that, like, he does this thing where if you hit him with your sword like 4 times, he kind of flinches and like steps on his back.
Reels.
Yeah, and what I thought I had to do was get Zelda to grapple with him in that moment, but the timing really tight.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And like I said, maybe I just got lucky with it, right? Like I just happened to dodge behind her the first time and figured it out. So, and I want to be clear, like we're not advocating for Fee jumping in here telling you exactly what to do, because we've been hypercritical of that before. But there's a balance between the game straight up telling you what to do and the game giving you hints about what the right thing to do is. And it's easy to go too far one way or the other. Fee being the obvious example of too far in the explicit instruction, and then this being too far in the direction of no instruction whatsoever.
I think that all Zelda games that I have played, aside from Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, have done a very good job of explaining to you, the player, what the boundaries of your abilities are.
Sure.
Like, what is the playbook that you're operating under? I can't think of another Zelda game where I've had this much confusion around like what is even possible for me to be doing with these players. Right?
I think that's totally fair.
Do you agree, Max? Like, can you think of another example of that in the series besides Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks to this extent?
Not necessarily. Adventure of Link, I guess, but that's kind of its own special category. Notably, the 3 games they're battling out for the bottom of my list.
I wonder if that's telling in any way, shape, or form.
Interesting. Yeah.
There's this concept of, like, one of the most important things you can do as a game developer to teach players what's going on is that when they try to do a thing, you give them feedback about the result of that thing. So like the classic example is they push a button, something should happen. And that thing that happens should be communicated back to the player through sound and video. But like written a little bit more large, like when you try to attack Burn, you should be able to understand from the way Burn reacts and the way the sort of sound effects and visuals you're seeing, whether you're attacking in the right way or not. So it could be something as simple as like they just needed to like give me more clear feedback that I was doing the wrong thing. Like instead of it being like, I think it's maybe doing something, maybe Burn should have like kicked Zelda away when I did it wrong. And then it would suddenly become much more clear when it was or wasn't the wrong thing to be doing. Which, by the way, this is like a core problem with why playing the flute in this game sucks so much. Because they give you 0 feedback on whether you're doing it right or wrong.
I will have much more to say on that later.
Can't wait. I can't wait for the rage to flow forth.
And
also, it's going to be fun because we haven't even, of all the things we talked about in the first hour of this episode with Max, we didn't even touch on the damn microphone. So, all right. It's going to be great. So anyway, though, the Burn as a fight, I think, even if the mechanics were super well explained and it was kind of lock and key, like some of the boss fights in the dungeons are in this game, I still think that when you're doing it right, he's not maybe as hard as I would have necessarily liked.
Definitely not as hard as I would have expected.
But also this serves as kind of a turning point for Burn's entire character. Like we come to know now what purpose Burn is serving in the narrative of Spirit Tracks, right? He's the misguided past good guy who is now having his moment, like his turning moment, right? That's my read on the whole thing.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair.
Yeah. Which is, that's cool.
It's cool. It's also very unexplored territory for a Zelda game. Has
have
there
a
ever
bad guy
been
come
an
good?
antagonist who became good in Zelda before?
I can't think of one.
Well, I mean, Skull Kid, but that's
but not
kind of
okay. Yeah,
that's more of like an end of game catharsis moment, though.
Right.
It's not like a.
You could kind of make a case for Groose, but he was never really the bad guy. He was just a jerk. But yeah, I think this is pretty unique.
Yeah.
It's not like Girahim, a betrayed demise at the end of that game and joined you. Like, we've never had that.
Yeah, it's funny because that is what comes, like, that comparison does come immediately to mind, right? Like, Byrne and Girahim are serving very similar roles in these games, right? Up until this point.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think that connection is definitely a very apt one.
So before we move up to the top of the tower scene, what did y'all think about Zelda and Link having their moment of like teamwork and go us, and then Byrne just walking away during that?
I thought this was hilarious.
That literally made me laugh out loud. As they were doing it, I was like, guys, this is not the time for that. Stop doing this. What are you doing? And then like the game knew that that's what I was thinking and said, yeah, you right.
I got a chuckle out of that too.
Yeah, I definitely I love it because it's like they're kids and they're like their relationship is one that I really like. You know, this Zelda and this Link have
are
a good
the highlight of the
relationship.
game, really.
Yeah, and so
Definitely.
they have this fun power of friendship moment. You know, it's like it's just so great.
Yeah, it was good.
It's one of those moments, like I was talking earlier about the soul of a Zelda game, right?
Yeah,
and a lot of the best Zelda games have got these moments of self-referential levity, you know,
and Phantom Hourglass has more than any other Zelda game.
It
really pokes fun at Zelda in general, like as a concept.
Yeah, sure.
Like when Zelda's like, normally I would just hang back and wait for you to do it.
It's
like,
kind of a
definitely has
tradition.
some of that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really funny, and I think it's well played. It's not like overly ham and cheese. It's not overly goofy. Like, I've been very critical of the goofy humor that Zelda sometimes does, and for some reason, Phantom Hourglass has not really fallen into the goof category that rubs me the wrong way. It's maintained kind of the self-effacing humor that resonates with me. I don't know what that says about my personality and my own sense of humor, but like the self-effacing jokes really resonate with me, and I liked it a lot. I thought it was well done. So like moving on to that, we're moving to the top of the tower. Byrne ascends the steps, and then we kind of chase after him. And once we get to the top of the tower, we see the classic scene of Zelda's body being, used in some dark ritual, and Cole is over there doing his little magic hands, jazz hands thing, and
magic jazz hands, dark magic jazz hands. Yeah.
and we see Zelda, like, her eyes open, and they're like Darth Maul eyes, and you're like, whoa.
Zelda, her eyes open.
Yeah, we haven't had a good Star Trek reference in a while, man.
Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra.
Yeah. Zelda and Link at the Tower of Spirits. So we get up there, and Zelda's eyes open. It's all Darth Maul, and then like we come to realize that, like, oh, we actually failed. We didn't stop Malladus's resurrection. And then, Zelda does her whole magic dark puppet thing that happened in Twilight Princess. She starts throwing bad juju at people and blasts Byrne. And
can I just say, creepy eye Zelda?
Did not like. Oh, gosh.
Man,
Ooh,
not a fan of that.
Eyed.
Yeah, that was gross. Ooh,
Yeah.
Didn't like.
Yep.
Yeah. We get up there and we failed, and they escape. They blast Byrne. Cole is like, "Oh, Malladus, you just aren't used to the new body yet. Let's get out of here while you adjust to it." Like, okay, weird, but sure. And then giant train thing from the beginning of the game shows back up. They board and fly away.
The demon train. Max, is the promise of Malladus as the big bad of this game at this point doing anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, the most it's doing for me is that it is not Ganon or Ganondorf, as far as I know. And if I didn't have any foreknowledge, I would be very suspicious that it was ultimately actually going to just be Ganon again. But other than that, it's not really feeling like a real presence in the story or the emotional story.
Better than Bellum. I mean,
it's better than Bellum, but not by much, because it still doesn't feel like a character.
It's better than Bellum because Burn and Cole exist.
Yeah, I think that's,
and they're the actual faces of the antagonist in this game.
Yeah, that's true. There is something to be said about Zelda's body being the inhabiting point for the Demon King, that adds a creep factor to it. But I would have to agree, overall, it's not doing a whole lot for me.
Yeah, I think that Malladus as a concept is one that I'm interested to see where it goes. At this point, what I'm really just grateful for is that we've got a little bit more of a lore behind Malladus, right? Like, I'm glad that there's a backstory and that we've seen the lingering effects of Malladus as a concept on the world, right? Like the spirit tracks being the things that are apparently binding him, and have kept him bound this entire time. There's a level of involvement with this villain in this game that Phantom Hourglass didn't have, right? Like, everyone was just kind of talking about Bellum, but outside of text bubbles, we had nothing, you know?
Yeah.
Up until the very end, where we finally meet Bellum in the flesh, and it had no personality. Like, there was never anything there at any point in that game. And at the very least, it seems like Malladus, while not the deepest villain that we've ever been presented with in a Zelda game, it does seem like, I don't know, there could be a few fun moments for that character before everything is said and done. So reserving judgment, but overall, I'm in alignment with y'all. It's neither the best nor the worst that Zelda has ever given us.
I will say that the presence of, the two antagonists that have names and faces, Burn and Cole, and Zelda as your active sidekick, both feel to me like answers to problems that Phantom Hourglass had. Because those were two huge problems that Phantom Hourglass had. And it feels like they explicitly took steps to address them in this game.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, again, in a lot of ways, that's kind of Spirit Tracks as a concept, right? Like, Spirit Tracks as a game in a lot of ways exists as an apology for Phantom Hourglass. Not always a very successful one, but like it's, it's apologizing for Phantom Hourglass better than Rise of Skywalker managed to apologize for The Last Jedi.
Which you have to bring that one in, don't you?
Which it didn't need to in the first place, but whatever. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. All right, let's get out of the Tower of Spirits and just talk about the sequence of events that takes us up to the dungeon this week. And it's been interesting, Max, because over the last few episodes, we've had this recurring point of feedback, which is that the events that are happening between Tower of Spirits and dungeon had really started to become, like, regardless of how fun any of the individual activities were to do, the fact that it was all fitting into the exact same format every week was robbing all of the enjoyment from it, right? Like, it had become so predictable and so regimented that we just weren't enjoying it anymore. And this week we have a situation that isn't expressly different. It's basically just an abbreviated version of what we've been doing for the last few weeks. And I think that makes it better.
Enough. Yeah. There's less busy work, for one thing. So a lot of these other segments have had stuff where you start being like, really? I need to go do another fetch quest and pick up another person, and they didn't have that this time as much. And honestly, it doesn't take that much of a change for it to feel fresh again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is that maybe it is just down to the fact that, like, we had a little bit of an exploration based puzzle that was required. Like, you still had to meet a Locomo, you still had to do a musical duet, right? All of that's the same. You still have to go through some kind of like overworld. I'm putting overworld in quotes here, but some kind of overworld based puzzle to get to the dungeon. But you completely cut out the whole extra level of we meet a new town full of people and they give me a bunch of stuff to do, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think this works a lot better and feels more fresh. It was honestly kind of rejuvenating in some ways. I don't know. I think overall, like, what are your thoughts on the desert in general? Like, outside of just the things we do, the desert sanctuary, the find the 4 statues, where do they cross?
Well, I'm not sure. At this point, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to have distinct thoughts on these new areas anymore, right? Because outside of the fact that they just look different artistically,
they're all the same.
It all works the same, right?
No, that's exactly what I was hoping you would say, because that's exactly how I feel. It doesn't feel any different than any other area. Like, the only thing that was cool was the sand sanctuary having a miniature of the overworld, again in quotes, and saying like, hey, go figure out where the 4 statues cross on the overworld, then come back here, and that's where you need to like blow it up. Like, that was kind of a neat little brain teaser puzzle. But other than that, it just feels like we're doing the same thing, we're revisiting the same areas. It's just all samey, is what I'm getting at.
It was so funny because, oh, sorry, you go, Max. I've got something, but I want you to,
Okay, I was just gonna say I can't really disagree. Like, there's a tiny little bit where like that whole thing where you need to find the statues and figure out where they overlap. Is a very standard puzzle when you're not in a train, but it was the first time we had it in a train, so it was like mildly interesting, which is the most interesting the overworld has ever been.
Mildly,
yep. So I'll give the desert that much at least. And the other thing, the point where I was actually surprised on the overworld was turning that corner and going up to the pyramid, and then suddenly those weird things that I saw on it, where I wasn't sure what they were, freaking turned and started shooting at me. I was surprised by that, and surprise is good.
Yeah, how the ziggurat was like, it had heavy armor, basically.
It had like battleship batteries.
Because why not? Why wouldn't it? Yeah.
Honestly, as weird as it was to see those very modern battleship batteries on a freaking ziggurat, it was kind of cool.
It was goofy as hell. But
it was goofy, but it was cool.
I
was here for it.
So my whole thing was what we were talking about, the whole area where you have to solve the puzzle to actually get to the Locomo, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, it's showing you it's basically a map of the overworld just in miniature, and you have to solve a puzzle around that. I didn't think that this was particularly fun, right? Because the execution was just kind of whatever. Like, it wasn't awful. It's just, it's not like it thrilled me. But it did have me thinking about like, oh man, some future Zelda game needs to do a variation of this where you find yourself in like a map room or something, but you don't know that's what it is. And using observational tactics, you have to like imagine if the map room in Tears of the Kingdom was a little larger and less informational, right? And you were having to like, I don't know, solve a puzzle by observing, like figuring out that it was conveying to you a miniaturized version of the geography of the overworld. Like that to me sounds like a lot of fun.
That would have been pretty cool. Yeah, agree.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, that'd be a neat thing to happen in the future, but yeah, I think all of that aside, talking about this whole having to attack the temple to actually get into it situation, because we've had variations of this with every other temple so far, right? Like last week with the fire temple, we had to do the maze, and we had to, what were they called? The Snurgluffs?
Yeah, Snurglars.
Snurglars?
Sorry, I hadn't heard that name before.
Yeah, we had...
Snurglars, yes.
One of the all-time great Zelda enemy names. Yeah, we had to fight the Snurgluffs, and then in Snow Temple we had to do the whole blizzard thing, right? And it's like, so where does this whole having to like go to war with the ziggurat? Where does this rank for you?
Let's
Matt?
go to war.
Yeah. No, I'm here for the going to war. I liked this more than pretty much all the other ones. Like, shooting things is always good, in my opinion.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
I agree. Max,
it was fun, and I liked it. Overall, positive feelings about the battlement. Their batteries.
Shoot the battleship. Yeah. So you know what I didn't have positive feelings about, Lyndon?
Oh gosh, let's talk about the microphone for a minute, shall we?
Duet. So, okay, look, everyone hates the microphone. If you don't, I don't know what to say to you other than your opinion is wrong. The microphone is an atrocity that never should have been visited on a single player game like this. It's horrible. So far, the duets haven't been too bad, but for some reason, the duet this week was borderline impossible for me to get. I literally spent 20 minutes on this freaking duet, and over the course of those 20 minutes, I was getting it. I swear I was getting it right every time. The timing, the everything. I don't know what was wrong. And of course, the game wasn't telling me what was wrong. It was just, oh, you didn't get it right. You want to practice again? No, I don't want to practice again. So over and over and over again, I couldn't figure it out. I looked up YouTube videos about like, hey, should I be doing this a different way? I tried.
Man, you went to YouTube.
I did. I tried different, like instead of just a continuous stream of air, I tried doing a single puff on each note. Like,
oh, that never works. You can't do that.
No, I tried everything and nothing worked. Eventually, the game actually crashed on me. It totally crashed. Luckily, I had saved right before. And so I reloaded the game, got back in, had to do the practice session again. And then the very first time I did the performance after the crash, it worked. I did nothing different. Literally nothing different, but it worked. So I don't know what was wrong, but janky ass system that is stupid, and I'd never ever want to see a microphone section in a Zelda game ever again. And I'm furious, and it was horrible.
Well, I mean, we're both going to beat this game tomorrow.
Well, yes, I know, but outside of this game,
and after that, I feel like you are never going to have to.
Assuming there isn't
an
impossible microphone segment in the final boss.
Oh, I'm sure there is. Based on what I've heard, I'm sure that there is.
God. Okay, great. Look, I want to talk about Max. I want to get your thoughts on the microphone. But real quick, can we just talk about crashes in Spirit Tracks? Because this is something that we didn't bring up. I didn't talk about this last week. I completely forgot to. But I have now had 2 complete crashes of my game. Mm-hmm. Last week's chunk, I lost my entire Tower of Spirits run.
Ooh, that's rough.
And had to redo it.
Zuko to Sakura.
Yeah, that's rough, buddy. Yeah. And so what happened was I was directing Zelda through a boulder puzzle, and Phantom Zelda collided with the boulder, and something about those 2 moving objects colliding shorted out the game. And just had to hard reboot with no save.
And to reiterate, we're not using bootleg copies. These are true OG copies of Spirit Tracks. These are not bootlegs.
Yep. And then this week, luckily, so I got through the entire desert, or the entire sand temple, and I got right up to the boss door, saved my game because I had to close the 3DS and go do something else. So I saved the game, activated the portal to get back to the beginning of the temple. And then when I opened it back up to go fight the boss, I took 2 steps and the game froze.
Like going through a doorway.
Yeah. And God, I don't know what possessed me to save the game in that moment when I did, because I'm usually not a compulsive saver, especially in Zelda games.
Yeah, you don't need to.
Yeah. I've never had this problem before. But now I've had it happen in Spirit Tracks twice, and Matt, you've had it happen. Mm-hmm. Max, I don't know if you've had any major game crashes.
I had a crash 3/4 of the way through the second dungeon and had to start over. Also, not an experience I've ever had in Zelda, unless you count the GameCube port of Majora's Mask, which was crashy as hell.
See, I've beaten that version like 3 or 4 times, and it never once crashed on me.
You are fortunate.
It blows my mind. I couldn't believe it when it happened to me the first time, and I really couldn't believe it when it happened twice. Like, this level of like instability from a Zelda game, I didn't think it was possible. Like, I thought, like, I just have it taken for granted in my mind that the Legend of Zelda series is engineered and developed to such a caliber that it is immune from such pedestrian issues as game crashes, right?
Yeah.
Apparently not.
Apparently not.
So talking about the microphone, though, moving on from the crashing, Max, just real quick. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming your thoughts on this whole system aren't any different than Matt's and mine or anybody else's, but this thing sucks, right?
It is truly terrible, and I'm honestly mystified about how it shipped. Like, I don't know how it passed whatever quality bar. I mean, which Nintendo is usually extremely good at sticking to. Like, I don't know why it was viewed as a thing that was acceptable to ship. Because it's bad in a number of ways. Both the technology is like unreliable. Like the actual microphone does not reliably pick up just sounds you're making, at least not for me. I had to buy an external microphone. I couldn't get through the first duet.
And your DS recognized the external microphone successfully? Like it just worked?
Yep. If you have one that's just like a headphone jack based one, so not USB, not Bluetooth or anything, it'll work.
Okay. That's good to know.
At least on a 3DS.
I have used the Majora's Mask 3DS built-in microphone for most everything. When I haven't used that, like if I've been playing in bed ever, I have used just like the Apple headphones that plug into the aux jack, and it seems to like that one more than the default mic. So
well, I might need to do that during the boss fight, which I'm led to believe has some awful microphone mechanic.
Yeah.
When I said it, it was a joke. God, is it real?
No, I've heard that is a real thing. Yes.
No, I'm so mad.
Yeah.
Can't wait. It's gonna be great.
But yeah, it's real bad. And also, I sort of hinted at this earlier, but like it from just a game design like perspective, it does not provide the player with enough feedback about what's going on. Like it's really hard to understand when you are or aren't giving new notes. Like it does this thing where if you keep blowing, it like pulses an animation on the pipe that you're on, but it's still only one note, but it looks like multiple notes. And then it drops it like stops detecting you're blowing while you're blowing. And and then you mess up on the very first note and it will make you finish like all 3 attempts before it tells you that you failed. So you have no idea at what point you failed because it doesn't tell you until the end. So if you don't really understand how it works, which you probably don't at first, I didn't, then it's hard to tell where you're going wrong.
Yeah. And moving into your specific issues with this Locomo song, Matt, I think it is just that this one has more notes, right? And what I have figured out is that the only reliable way to use the flute is in just one long unbroken blow.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's the time that it worked. I was doing that.
Yes. But it's hard with this because there's like 5 notes. And so you've
6.
really got to
and there's one part where you have to skip over a note, like they're not adjacent.
Yeah, that's always kind of annoying where you have to like, as a tuba player, you have to just like close your embouchure, slide it over, and re-go. Like, I'm glad I played tuba in high school, or I probably wouldn't have the lung capacity to sustain this. Like, yeah.
I played tuba in high school and college, and I barely have the lung capacity to sustain this.
That's because you're old now.
Yes, I am old. Thank you. As you mentioned last week.
As I mentioned last week.
I've got 40 on the horizon. Thanks for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for. Bring you down to earth every once in a while.
All right. I think that's all we have to talk about on this little interstitial section, just our takes generally. But I think a good elevator pitch for this whole general section of the game this week is it's an improvement because it does less. Is that about where we're all at?
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy.
Ouch.
Cool.
Damning with faint praise doesn't even work here because it's not a praise.
Yes. Oh, Lordy. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get into part 3, which is the dungeon map, which is the section where we talk about
the dungeon from mechanics to music and more.
Music and more. Yeah. Okay.
Etc.
Anyway, this whole episode has me so discombobulated because just, again, inside pod baseball here, between the last time we gave you an update on the technical things going on with the recording of this episode and now, we've had to stop and start the recording 3 separate times. So
we're on recording number 6.
So editing this one's going to be really fun for me.
And we've had to move inside.
Yeah. And my brain's a little fried right now.
Yeah, so. Mechanics to music and more, Lyndon. Dungeon map.
Dungeon map. Right. Mechanics, music, and moss. This week's dungeon is the Sand Temple, which for my money is actually, this is the area where I'm kind of coming into alignment with you, Max. Like this dungeon is doing a lot of work to single-handedly sort of elevate my overall impression of this game versus Phantom Hourglass specifically. I think Spirit Tracks so far has been a really fun story of just increasing gains on dungeon fun factor from week to week, right? And this week's is no exception. So just a quick overview on the dungeon itself, and then I'm going to send it to you, Max, to give us your thoughts on it. But the Sand Temple is a multi-floor dungeon. It is not symmetrical at all in its layout. It's interesting because when you look at this dungeon on a map, it looks very similar to the way that some of the earlier Spirit Tracks dungeons and the Phantom Hourglass dungeons are designed, right? Where it seems kind of haphazard in its arrangement, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have that intentionality of layout that I've said so often that I really look for in a top-down dungeon arrangement. But even though that is the case, it makes up for that a lot in the complexity of its puzzles, right? There are a lot of very well-designed puzzles in this dungeon, mostly revolving around the dungeon's main item, which is the sand rod, which functions very similarly to how the sand rod does in A Link Between Worlds. Like they're very similar items, and so the learning curve there was kind of, not as steep as it could have been, just because I already kind of had the sand rod from A Link Between Worlds in mind. But there's a lot of puzzles that revolve around differences in height and using the sand rod to create pillars that elevate you from one floor to a next within a floor, right? And also using the sand rod to physically move rollable objects like boulders and stuff like that around a space to solve puzzles. Enemies in this dungeon they include Stalfos. We have a new variety of Stalfos here, which go aggro on you.
Yes, the ones wearing the knight armor.
Yeah, they're looking to hack you to pieces.
Just throw a bomb at them.
Yeah. And then we've also got, it's actually not a very enemy-dense dungeon at all.
Yeah,
right?
There's not a lot.
There's those Stalfos, and then there's the
sand critters.
I think they're called Garunas. I think that sounds right.
Good enough.
Anyway, yeah, sand critters. And that's basically it that we have in here. Slugs.
There was like the sand heads and then the slugs that come out of the sand.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Sandaroks. Yeah. That's kind of what they were. Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of environmental puzzles, right? Moving, like rolling boulders and Indiana Jones style shit. So a lot of sand-based puzzles, and then the boss of this dungeon is, oh gosh, this guy has such a cool name too, and I just blanked on it. Skeldritch.
Yep.
Yeah. Which, man, we'll have a lot more to say about Skeldritch here in just a minute. But so that's just kind of a basic rundown on the Sand Temple. Max, I would love to hear your overall thoughts on the Sand Temple as a dungeon experience.
Yeah. I love this dungeon. I think it's by far the strongest dungeon in this game, and honestly pretty strong overall for the series. Continuing the streak of sand dungeons always being awesome. And also continuing the streak of sand dungeons being set up by the good guys in the story to protect a holy item and then filled with undead to guard it. That's happened like 3 times in the series now.
That's kind of a weird coincidence that keeps happening.
But
I like it.
No doubt about that.
I'm down for the good guy Stalfos, I guess. But yeah, anyways, so from kind of a dungeon design perspective, the things I appreciate here are atmosphere, right? It's got it to me, it has a more coherent atmosphere and presence than a lot of the other dungeons. Like, it feels like it's set up with a purpose narratively. The music I noticed more than I have in most of the other dungeons, and it felt on point. The item is on theme. It all kind of gels together in a way where it all feels like it goes together. Even the space feels like it's kind of built to serve a purpose, and the purpose is traps, right? Is to test you and to trap you. But like, it doesn't have the problem that like the first dungeon has, where it's just a bunch of random rooms strung together seemingly from dice rolls. You can feel the intention there, as I think you've described it, Lyndon. So those things are all good. And I was very pleased by the fact that until I got the item, I didn't know what the item was going to be. And maybe that's just me being dumb, but like I was like, I don't know what the item is. And I saw these big things, like the big traps that looked like they had to be rolled around. So I was like, it's going to be a strength item, maybe?
I thought the same thing. I thought like power gauntlets.
Yeah. So I thought it was going to be like the Titan's mitt or something. And I was surprised to get a sand rod, and I was like, oh, that's so cool.
So this was a really cool moment for me as well, because I went into this dungeon thinking that the dungeon item was going to be the bow of light, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's the whole thing. It's like you're going there to try and get this thing. And I was like, and because of that, I went into this dungeon not unexcited, but just kind of like, all right, well, I guess the surprise is gone. I'm going to get the bow of light, and there's going to be some light-based puzzles in here or whatever. And then I was kind of wandering around the first few rooms and seeing puzzles that like the one you're talking about, Max, where it's like, okay, I see this mechanic where there's a launcher here and there's a boulder off to the side. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't currently have the means to do it. But how does the bow of light help me here? Like whenever I get it, right? Yeah. And it turns out it was all just a big old fake out.
Yep. 2 fake outs. And that's great. I also was worried that it was going to be just the bow of light. Once I got in and saw those things, I was like, oh, it's not the bow of light. It's strength item. Both were wrong. But I've talked before about this thing that a good Zelda dungeon does, which is recontextualization, where elements of the dungeon that you see earlier on, ideally you don't know how they're going to be used or how they're going to come together. And then at some point, usually upon getting the item, suddenly you understand what those elements are, and it makes you look at all those previous rooms differently. So in this case, like one of the things it did was I could see that there was this huge map, right? Like I saw all this space, I saw all these places I couldn't get to, but like the actual traversable area was pretty small, pretty linear. And then like you go deeper and deeper. I think you go like 3 floors down or up, something like that, before you find the rod. And suddenly I get that, and I don't really get it at first, right? Like I'm like, oh, I can play with this. And eventually I solved my first puzzle about putting it underneath yourself to elevate yourself, which is different from the Link Between Worlds sand rod, which you cannot just elevate yourself anywhere with. So that was new. And then once I did that, suddenly it all clicked, and suddenly my mental image of all this dungeon like blasted open, right? Like it went from all these narrow pathways and all these places I couldn't get to like, oh, now I can get to all these places. So that's a good moment every time it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Matt, what did you think of the sand rod as a dungeon item here?
I thought the traversal that it gave you was really cool, and the way that it interacted with the puzzles, the moving of the big blocks so that you could rotate them around kind of Rubik's Cube style, moving the boulders in their certain directions. All of that was really, really cool, and it's kind of rare that we have an item that is solely devoted to puzzles. There's no combat advantage at all, other than like pulling the sand moles or whatever they are out of the sand. Like it's rare, and I think it works really well. I think, Max, you're totally right and on point when, like, as soon as you got that and realized you could boost yourself up, like, it opened up the entire dungeon, and all of the things made sense, and you start looking at things very, very differently and approaching situations different than you would have before. I think all of that's super true. So in that vein, I think it's really good. I think it's a strong, unique item. One thing we talked a lot about in Phantom Hourglass was the reinvention of items to do different things than they had before in a positive way. And this feels like that, but for an item that's only, to my knowledge, existed in one other Zelda game. So like seeing that iteration is really cool and strong. And I'm glad to see Spirit Tracks finally do that.
It's so funny because Spirit Tracks unless I'm misremembering something, has only got 2 items that are 100% distinct from what Phantom Hourglass had, right?
The Sand Rod and
the Whirlwind.
Whirlwind.
Right.
And the Whirlwind sucks.
Yeah, one of which is terrible.
Worst item in any Zelda game ever.
Yeah, actually, I think is the worst item in any Zelda game.
Easily.
The Whirlwind is atrocious.
It is misery itself.
Yeah.
Isn't the whip unique to this game?
I am categorizing the whip in the same conversation as the grapple hook or whatever it was from Phantom Hourglass. Like I know they're called different things, but they're sort of used for similar-ish reasons. Really? I don't know.
They feel pretty different to me.
Okay. I mean, they probably are. But, I'm also kind of conflating like Skyward Sword's whip and some stuff in here as well. So it's like the whip is, if nothing else, the whip is a bit more of a known quantity item to me in this game. Even if it's not a direct lift from anything in Phantom Hourglass. It is like you kind of know what you get with it for the most part. But the Sand Rod is so interesting to me because even if you want to compare it to the Sand Rod in A Link Between Worlds, I think that this one has got a lot more interesting functionality than that one does, right? It does some of the same things as the one from A Link Between Worlds, but it also does more, right? Because the fact that you are able to continuously summon sand pillars by using the stylus means that you're able to use it to manipulate the movement of certain objects, right? Which creates a lot of different situations that you can use it in versus A Link Between Worlds where it's mostly used to create either barriers or walkways from one point to another. But anyway, so I think that this Sand Rod has got a lot of interesting things going for it. And initially I was going to bring it up as a negative, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like last dungeon of the game. As fun as it is in this dungeon, I know that it's not going to be the kind of item like the things that you do with it basically mean that it's not going to have this kind of impact anywhere else in the game, right? Like It reeks of an item that is fun, but only fun in this dungeon, right?
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. And it's a
But if you're going to do that, like I was going to bring it up as a negative because I hate when that happens in Zelda games.
Yes.
But also, if you're going to do that, then do it with this kind of thing.
That's true. Where it's not combat potential. It's just like, cool, go solve some cool puzzles.
Right. Exactly. Like Link's Awakening, right? The Fire Rod.
Yeah.
You get it in the very last dungeon of the game.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That if you're gonna give an item that can only be in a dungeon, put it in the final dungeon. Makes sense. It's not like you're gonna go do much else at that point, anyways. And it also makes sense for it to be an item that has like a lot of utility in a very specific context, because then you can make that context in the final dungeon, and you can get a lot of mileage out of it while you got it. So that you don't feel like it's underutilized afterwards. Because there's a lot of stuff you do and a lot of different ways to do combat and puzzles with this item when you're in this place.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And I think the puzzles in this dungeon are just really good, honestly.
Well, and the thing is, too, also, this item could have a lot of impact on our next Tower of Spirits experience as well, right? Like
if there is another one.
I don't know if there is, actually.
I don't either.
But the point stands. Like, we're taking it kind of for granted here that Sand Rod is not going to be used at all for the rest of the game, which is probably true, but maybe it's not. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. And honestly, if it's not, I still think it's a top tier item just because of the really cool way that it's been used so far in the dungeon. Like I was saying, the puzzles are really, really good. I really loved the block puzzles, getting those, like flipping them around on the sand, trying to get them to go into their dedicated spots with the right way. I thought those were a lot of fun. I liked moving the boulders around. And
I will say moving boulders around with the Sand Rod for me, in the dungeon itself, and especially in the boss fight, I never got a good feel for how to do it most efficiently, right?
Yeah, there's definitely an efficiency problem moving a circular object with square blocks of sand. Definitely a translation issue there.
Well, and also sometimes I feel like... Oh, sorry, go Max.
Oh, I was gonna say I had trouble. It seemed clunky to me at first until I realized I could kind of just draw the path I wanted and it would kind of pretty intuitively push it along that path. So by the end of it, I was able to move boulders right where I wanted them really fast.
I was having an issue where I would be drawing towards the boulder in the direction that I wanted it to move, but it would create a sand pillar on the other side of the boulder and push it the other way. Like I had that happen several times. And I think a lot of that is just down to kind of some of the imprecision of the touch technology that's being used here, right?
It's definitely a little mushy.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Yeah. And it's fine. Like it's what we were talking about earlier, right? Extra levels of friction around some of these things, right? Sometimes it's really bothersome, and sometimes I'm just willing to put up with it for the sake of enjoying the mechanic. And that's kind of what I was doing here, you know?
Yeah.
For the moments where it was kind of clunky, I was annoyed by that, but I was still enjoying it overall. And that never really stopped. From the moment we got the sand rod all the way up until the boss and whatever. And I think there were some really clever puzzles in this dungeon, right? Puzzles where you've got the rotating spike walkway columns, right? And you have to create a sand pillar that stops it in the right place so that you can walk over it, stuff like that.
Or boost yourself up so you can actually get on it and then move around.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you do really have to learn how to parse the timing of those things. Like, how much time do I have before this pillar dissolves and falls away, right?
Yeah. The one time that I did not have a good time with the sand rod was the maneuvering around the sinking sand pits and with all the arrows that were shooting at you in that one hallway. I didn't really like that one because I kept getting knocked off into the sand, or like the pillar that I created would fall out from under me. Like that one was a little frustrating, but that was mostly like a timing issue, I think.
Yeah.
But that was the only thing in this whole dungeon, I think, that it was less than like really good.
Yeah, I agree. Max, I mean, in my opinion, the sand rod as an item is one where it's like, once you get it, the ways in which you need to use it just kind of become self-evident by using it. And I think that to me is the hallmark of a good Zelda item. I mean, did you feel the same way about it?
Yeah, I can see exactly what you mean, because it's always about putting a block in space, right? And we understand what a block does, right? It stops things from moving because things can't pass through it. It raises you up or other things up because it comes out of the ground. And then it's all kind of just intuitive, like, what would that do to things? And then it's kind of like it does to objects what you would expect it to do to those objects for the most part after that. So it's kind of just applying your lateral thinking at that point afterwards. Yeah. As opposed to doing a thing where you try a bunch of stuff and you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
A bad item would do.
For sure. The only area where I had a little bit of confusion was when you're using it against the sand head monster people, the Garumas or whatever they're called.
Yeah, that was a little confusing.
Yeah, because
right,
I didn't.
That was bad.
I didn't understand that there was a functionality to this item where you could like hold it on them,
right?
In order to where it basically becomes a charge beam. You know?
Because there isn't in any other context so far.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just that one enemy.
And I had to look this up. Like I actually Googled that. Yeah, because I was like trying to tap on them with it,
that doesn't work. No.
And they were just running. And I was like, okay, look, I get it. I'm supposed to use this item to beat these guys, and it's just not happening, And so I had to Google that. And then once I got it, I was like, okay, cool, fine, I understand it now. And it made me wonder if I missed a little text blurb when I opened up the chest or something, but I don't think I did.
Anyway. No, you didn't.
So
cool. Do you guys have anything else to say before we move on to boss room?
Let me just get my notes really quick. I like that the sand heads looked like the Geldman art from Link to the Past.
Yeah.
It was kind of horrifying how we destroy them, by the way.
Yeah, they just kind of crumble. Yeah,
they turn into this frozen rictus grin when you hold down the sand rod on them, and then you can just kill them with your sword.
Yeah. Or use them as props to depress switches.
Yeah.
They have a clear they're a clear downgrade from Geldman in one specific area, which is that when you freeze them, it turns out that they are not wearing bikinis.
No Speedos.
Yeah.
B-, no Speedos.
Yeah, exactly. My only note.
I have a note that there were a bunch of puzzles that required you to use another or previous item that you already have in conjunction with the sand rod. So it would be like, here's a spot where you need to use the sand rod to get access to a pillar that you can swing on with your whip. Or here's one where you need to use it to gain access to a target with your bow. Mm-hmm. And they kind of found all these ways, thankfully, except for the windmill, which I was glad to not have to pull out. I really expected Sand Temple to be full of windmill puzzles.
I tried to use the whirlwind on or I'm just going to call them Geldman because it works.
Sure.
I tried to use the whirlwind on the Geldman, and when it didn't work, I breathed a sigh of relief. It was amazing.
Yeah, same. But yeah, that's all I got. Oh, actually, no. One more thing is the music was pretty good.
Agree.
Made me want to briefly just talk about the music in this game.
Yes, go.
Which I think is good. I think this game has a good soundtrack. I don't think it's among the best Zelda soundtracks. Like even the best tracks in here aren't going to make it into my top 10 list of Zelda tracks or anything. But like after Phantom Hourglass, it was very nice to go to this style of game and actually have new music all over the place. And it was all pretty good. And honestly, the overworld theme carries like 90% of what makes of the good parts of being on the overworld.
Amen.
It didn't have that amazing bopping train soundtrack. The kind of bad experience would be miserable.
So here's the question I have, Max. When you're riding around in the train and the overworld theme is jamming, are you chewing the horn in time with the music?
Oh, I never thought about that.
Oh, you should. It's fun.
Give it a try. It's fun.
It adds a layer. It's great.
All right. When I pick the game up to beat it, I will try that
out. But yeah, I mean, the music is overall excellent in this game. As far as this dungeon's musical theme too, I thought it was interesting. I didn't clock this immediately, and I don't know why I didn't, but it's the exact same soundtrack as the Fire Temple. Like we heard this last week.
Oh, is it really?
As well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I liked it.
But it's weird because last week we were talking about how it's like, oh, this music would feel right at home in the Ocarina of Time Fire Temple or whatever, right? And then this week I get in there and I'm like, oh yeah, this sounds desert as you know? It's like, yeah, okay, turns out that kind of goes both ways and works for both things. That's impressive.
I agree completely.
Yeah, I did not make the connection that they're the same at all, but that's even better.
So, but yeah, soundtrack in Spirit Tracks definitely got some high highs. Stark contrast to Phantom Hourglass. Let's go ahead and get into our discussion about the boss of this dungeon, which is Skeldritch.
Super cool name.
Super cool name for a super cool boss. Just right off the bat. Look, we had an issue with early bosses in Spirit Tracks not taking advantage of the scale, like the dual screen, like the magnitude.
I thought Kragma had a good dual
right,
screen.
but Kragma's where it started to turn around, right?
Agreed. Yes.
Then this boss takes it an extra step further.
Totes agree.
Man, Skeldritch to me was hands down the most fun boss in the entire game. A lot of that was presentation, right? Like we have this massive arena and Skeldritch is imposing and huge. And at no point in the fight was it difficult to understand what you had to do. It's just actually doing it required coordination and precision. And with an elevation of difficulty as you went further and further into it, right? It didn't even necessarily have like a 2-phase setup, you know? It's a 1-phase boss that just gets gradually more difficult the further that you get into it, which I think is impressive. Like I will like if you don't want to have a 2-phase boss, then do this, and it's equivalent to me. Like,
although it did have 2 phases, but
that's fair.
Yeah,
okay,
it did.
Okay.
But I see what you mean in that, like the main fight where it just got progressively harder with more boulders that it shot, faster boulders, etc., like having to use different catapults, all of that. It's same phase, but just up in difficulty. I totally agree. Like it increases the sense of urgency. It increases the difficulty level.
It's totally the first half of the Star-Lord fight, though.
Oh, I mean, yeah, in some ways I agree with that. But like, man, it's good. This is a good boss fight. Very, very, very good.
Yep. Max,
I think it's better than the first half of the Star-Lord fight.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
I agree
definitely.
with that, actually. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that this boss fight really has a chance to crack kind of top 10, maybe. Like it's up there in like just well designed, good overall space, good vibe of a boss room, and the mechanics and item usage like all just kind of mesh together in a really cool way that elevates this far past what I would expect a DS Zelda game to be able to do.
Well, I was over here not expecting the term top 10 to overlap with Spirit Tracks at any point. So that's a bold statement.
I mean, are you wrong? Do you disagree?
I need to think about it. Max, where are you at with
I'm
it?
saying top 10 is just like general, as in like it's really good. I don't know if it's actually top 10.
Hey, Matt, how about you let Max talk for a minute?
Fine.
Yeah, so I pretty much agree with a lot of what you're saying. Visual presentation is big for this one. It actually gets a sense of scale, like Phantom Hourglass bosses did, and otherwise in a way that is only seen in full 3D Zelda games, right? They do the thing in these DS ones where they are top down like 90% of the time, but they do go into these like more third person or sideways views at times, and it's kind of impressive that the games still work. Like you would expect that to really mess with it, and it messes with it just a little bit. Like you end up in situations where it's like it's hard to make your guy run because like the distances are distorted, but it works okay when all you need to do is run right or left, and that's really all you need to do 90% of the time in this boss fight. So it's great.
Yeah, well,
I
and
definitely
that's
had the thought of like, what the heck was this a skeleton of?
Right.
Yes, agreed.
Imagining this thing with flesh is horrifying.
So the whole conversation too around like your movement feeling different depending on the size of the arena and how scaled you are within it. That's something that we've mentioned once or twice this season already, and it never ceases to feel weird when it happens.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree with that. And again, I don't think this game does curvature very well. Like it feels like you're kind of running in a square when it's a circular arena. I just don't think this game, or Phantom Hourglass for that matter, did curvatures well at all.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
But I mean, just in terms of like, Matt said a very intense thing, which was in his mind, this is fighting for at least being a part of the conversation of like all-time good Zelda bosses.
Yeah.
Not like best of all time, but like
it's up there.
But good. Like very good. Do you think do you agree with that, Max?
I do not. Part of that might be my anti-Spirit Tracks bias. It's a little bit hard to separate my opinions from the fact that like everything else in the game makes me miserable.
I still hate this game. Let's be clear.
I think it lacks that memorable factor for me, right? Like it was fun. I had fun while I was playing it, but I don't think I'm going to remember it a year from now. I don't think I remember anything from this game a year from now, to be honest.
Other than how much you hated it?
Yeah. But like the good Zelda bosses, like the best top tier Zelda bosses, I can remember years after playing them. And it's not always just nostalgia, although some nostalgia definitely helps with that. So like that's kind of the line, I guess, that this is a little bit below for me.
Well, I mean, to that point though, like I'm gonna remember fighting Colgera in 10 years, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, for sure.
I don't know. Like when you frame it that way, I don't know. I do think that this is a very good boss fight, and I think that it is. I had a lot of fun participating in it. Maybe I'm just looking for things to like in this game at this point.
That might be fair.
Just
honestly.
out of desperation, right? Like that could be a part of it too. I don't know. Because the thing is, I know that we had good boss fights in Phantom Hourglass. Like I remember us talking about them, but I don't remember what any of them are now.
That's fair.
Or any of their names.
Other than the three little witches on the ghost ship.
Yes. Aside from that
gave us Dead Man's Volley.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
As a term.
But I don't remember anything else about any of them. I have vague remembrances of some of them. I remember that there was one that was just the big like automaton mech.
Oh yeah,
dude.
Okay, yeah, I remember that guy.
But I don't remember how the fight went.
No, I don't either.
You know,
that's fair. All right, fine. I retract my statement. Okay, you convinced me. Statement retracted. Point stands.
I didn't. Shame?
I don't feel shame. No, I don't feel any shame.
Look, it was your own fault for feeling too positive about Spirit Tracks for half a second.
You're totally right. You're totally right on that.
We got a good observation out of it, so it was good.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Max. Okay. I appreciate it.
But regardless, look, within the context of this game that we're trying to beat,
man, really try it.
This was fun. Look, because the reality is I've had a lot of fun fighting a lot of different Zelda bosses, and I don't necessarily have them all committed to memory.
For sure.
You know, it wasn't bad.
No.
Right? Like it was
good.
It was a good Zelda boss. It was fun.
Objectively good boss.
Yeah. Probably middle of the pack at the end of the day.
For sure.
But that's fine. Like most Zelda bosses are. And at this point, I'm just looking for experiences in this game that feel like Zelda to me.
Amen.
You know?
Yep.
And this boss fight felt like Zelda to me.
Yeah.
So
I can agree with that.
That's all I need from it. Literally, that's all I need.
Now just do the rest of the game that way.
Do it again. Yeah. Shaq's voice. Now do it again.
Yes.
Anyway.
We have the rare destiny.
Right. You think we would have more of them.
We really don't, though.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, do we have anything else we want to say about the Sand Temple before we exit this part of the discussion and go on to other
I have
things?
one thing. The music when you go into grab the bow of light, I liked that music a lot. The atmosphere just in that little undertunnel, I liked that music quite a lot.
Okay, cool. Another win in the Spirit Tracks has good music column. Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about fascinating things that diverted our attention this week. Max, I'm going to let you go first because you had some specific thing that you mentioned earlier. And I don't think Matt or I have anything. Yeah. No.
Oh,
Actually, I have one.
I have a bunch of stuff. I'm going to have to narrow it down.
So proud of you.
Really? Wow. Okay.
A brief note about side quests in this game. Most side quests involve taking people or resources from point A to point B. And going from point A to point B for most of the game was really unpleasant.
Yes.
However, by this point, I had unlocked a lot of quick travel points. So it was finally becoming more pleasant.
Good for you.
And the other thing, of course, is the reward for most side quests is more train tracks, which typically just led to either rabbits or quick travel points. So it was kind of like, I can't do side quests, we don't have enough fast travel, and I can't get fast travel because I can't do side quests. So that was like, I generally had a bad experience with side quests throughout the whole game.
Hey, Max. We heard that you like trains, so we're going to give you a side of trains with your trains.
Yep. But so I love the concept of side quests giving you access to more parts of the map. Like, that's really cool. it's just that all the other elements that needed to come together for that to be enjoyable didn't come together, like the train travel being fun and there being surprising things to find, and so honestly, side quests did not have interesting stories in this game for the most part, right? Like, none of these characters made you emotionally invested in their stories.
Nope.
It was always just like, we need some ice. Okay, I'll get you some ice.
Hey, can we get some lumber and a handyman to build us a fence? Why do you need a fence? We just need a fence. Okay, sure.
Yeah, so not great. But there was one side quest that I was interested in, which was the town in Ocean Land, who had all of its men kidnapped. And I was like, this feels like it should be something. So I made sure to do all the side quests for that town, and I unlocked access to that. And you two did not do that?
Oh, no.
No, absolutely not. Look,
okay, so the best minigame in this game is on an island that you can only access after you bring together, I forget, one of the quests in that town. It opens up a path and it gives you access to an island, and there's a really good minigame in there that involves your bow, which maybe that'll entice you too.
I did like
so
the
that
shooting.
Was my Z targeting.
I liked the bow minigame in Phantom Hourglass.
Yes,
so.
bow minigames are good.
So, anyways, long story short, my Z target of the week is the bow minigame that is on the Pirate Fortress Island.
Okay.
Bloopy Trail, you mean?
So I have also been
Bloopy Trail. Are we doing Bloopy Trails? Or
it's Bloopy Trails, yes. Look, it's been a long night. It's been a long night.
Yeah, we're in Bloopy Trail. But that's okay. Everything you said was applicable to that. I will say I have also been intrigued by the Pirate Fortress. I've driven past it enough times and it stands out, right? Like, I want to figure out what's up with it. But like I always just come back to the whole thing of like, any time that I want to spend figuring these things out is going to require me to be driving around this freaking map in the train, which is going to take me 20 minutes, right? Like maybe not actually 20 minutes, but it feels like 45 minutes.
Feels so long, man.
You know?
Like I look down and I'm like, I swear I've been driving this train for 20 minutes, and it's like, nah, it's been like 2.5.
However, your endorsement of this being a very fun minigame makes me want to go at least give it a try. So I will give it a shot and see if I can make that happen. I mean, I'm starving for that kind of thing in this game, and it sucks because I do believe that there are opportunities to engage with side content in Spirit Tracks. Like I've seen the walkthroughs online. I get it. It's in there. There's just such a barrier to entry for interacting with it. Right. Like, and that's a shame. Like that really bums me out. And like, nobody's more disappointed than me that I haven't discovered more side content in this game.
Yeah.
You know,
that's fair.
But it's like it's so aggressively working against the player.
My interest. I want to do these things. I sit down and I think to myself, I could spend the next 35 minutes that I have in my day trying to do some side quests, or I could just progress towards the next dungeon and then maybe work on some plot recap. And every time on this game specifically, I'm going with progress the game, work on some plot recap.
You know, Matt,
I'm just I can't.
Yeah. You know what I think? I think that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have ruined my concept of how to waste 30 minutes in a video game.
That's a very good point.
Forever.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
I don't know that I can ever come back.
Yeah, that's true. And me being an RPG player for most of my young adult life up to now where I'm in my 30s, like this game's version of engaging with the overworld in massive air quotes is just like less than 0% interesting to me. So I think that's a big part of my problem with it as well.
All right. I mean, so we're still in Bloopy Trails. Matt, did...
No, I did one thing.
Really? Okay.
I went back to the Knock 'em Down minigame, which is still really fun. Knock 'em Down is great. It's just Combat Gauntlet. And one thing that this game does actually have going for it is the fact that combat can be fun because of the touch controls with items can be good. And like there's a couple rooms in the Knock 'em Down game where you can just sit in the middle of the room and just tap things with the bow, and if you have the large quiver, you can just like literally you're basically a turret with arrows. It's really fun. That's where I learned how to use the whip on the Zolas to get the shields off of them. So like some of this stuff does work really well, and you get to fight Froz again, which I know you loved that Froz fight.
Oh, okay.
So you get to fight Froz.
Yeah.
You do unfortunately have to fight Phytops, which is still not fun, but you know, is what it is. So
I didn't hate Phytops. He's just gross.
Yeah, he's just weird. So, but Knock Him Down round 2 was good. I enjoyed it quite a lot. So
okay. I mean, yeah. Look,
the reward is not worth it because all you get is a piece of treasure, which does nothing for you. But the experience itself was good.
I have nothing. Look, I'm at a point in my life where I'm ready to get Legend of Zelda tattoos on my body. Right?
Yeah.
They will be there until I die.
Yes.
Right?
And after you die for a while.
True.
They will outlive you.
You're right. And I can't bring myself to go do Blue Betrayal shit in this game. Right? Like, it's just, I don't know what it is. Every other Zelda game that I've ever played, including kind of Phantom Hourglass, right?
I at least did some in Phantom Hourglass. I did the trading quest in Phantom Hourglass.
Sure, yeah, exactly. It had a way of like moving you into these things without requiring you to do them, you know? Yeah. And Spirit Tracks is just like I'm logging on and I'm doing my bit for the week and
I'm reading my chapters.
And there's nothing that's happening within that is incentivizing me to look outside of it, you know? Like there's no signposting, there's nothing that's intriguing me to go look outside of that base content. And
I agree.
And I think that's a big failing of this game. Like you could go into this game and you could beat it. You could play each weekly dungeon and the quest leading up to it, and you could beat the entire game without any inkling that there was anything more to do.
I think the answer is pretty simple, which is that there is nothing that happens in this game that makes you emotionally invested in anything except the main plot. And most Zelda games do that through characters, through character work. And some Zelda games do that by like tantalizing you, right? They like, you see something that piques your interest or your curiosity, and then you want to figure it out, which to me was the Pirate Island in this game. And that's the only thing in this game that did that. But like, it's like the anti-Link's Awakening, where Link's Awakening had few characters and they were all fascinating weirdos that you loved. And this game has a ton of characters and they're all boring, forgettable people that you don't care about.
Even Weinbeck 3 isn't all that interesting. He's got like 2 lines now.
Totally
like
wasted.
he was very interesting when he came on the scene, and now every time I go see him, he literally says the same 3 things to me. Never changes.
So there's no emotional core to any characters or any side quests or any places
besides Zelda. And she's just part of your main quest. So like, why would I want to do anything outside of that? I just want more Zelda, which means that I have to go progress through the main quest faster to get more interactions with Zelda. I don't care about anybody else.
So if Link's Awakening is Twin Peaks, then what shitty one-season television show is Spirit Tracks?
I don't know. I don't watch enough TV for that.
Just something for us all to think about. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock onto fascinating characters or enemies that we happen across. Matt has one ready to go
because I want to take Skeldritch.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we don't do enemies a whole lot, but Skeldritch was a dope. To Max's point, I want to know what this dude looked like when he had flesh on his bones, because God, it's gotta be beyond terrifying. Like he's like the top 6 vertebrae are just literally cannons that shoot boulders. Like I want to know what that looks like. Like, are the cannons coming out of his chest? Like, does he look like some kind of Jaeger from Pacific Rim? Like. That's the only thing I can imagine is like Flesh Jaeger, which is just like a horrible.
Skeldritch was a kaiju.
Ugh, God, that's just disgusting.
This was Attack on Titan in Zelda.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm here for it though. Skeldritch, super dope. Here for it.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to go with Burn this week, who I haven't used yet. I don't know what is left to do for this character past this point. I'm assuming that the redemptive moment is going to continue into next week. But next week is also the finale, so I'm going to leave myself open to use
Zelda,
Malladus, anyone.
Yeah.
Did I use Zelda in the first week? I don't think so.
I don't know.
I should really make notes of these things.
We should probably be more professional about the way we do podcasting.
I'm going to tell at the age of 33, I'm going to tell myself the same thing that I told myself
yourself since age 12
in like 7th grade, which is you should take more notes.
Maybe we should be more professional about the way we do things.
Exactly.
I don't know. Maybe not.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with Burn. So we get the turn of the character here, and it is interesting. Like I'm excited to see where it goes from this point, and to see if the promise of the villain adjacent characters in this game actually pans out towards the end of it. Cole and Burn seemed like interesting characters at the beginning, and we haven't seen them again really until this week. And we still don't know exactly what Cole's deal is, but now we know a little bit more about Burn, and it's interesting. Like I'm here for it. So
I'm also very gratified to know that the Locomos are just people who are sitting in train wheelchairs instead of half train, half people.
Oh yeah. So this was the whole thing we talked about last week, Max. Like Matt and I were under the impression that the Locomos were like trained centaurs. Like.
And that is apparently not real. So I'm glad we were wrong about that, honestly.
I'm still not convinced that they aren't, and that Burn isn't just a weird anomaly.
Maybe when they ascend to their like sage status, they trade in their legs for train parts, like some Borgification or something.
Oh my god!
No, I hope
time
not.
For the ritual.
Gross.
Jeez. Okay, Max, how about you? What's your Z targeting situation?
I'm gonna give an answer. So, as a guest, I get to pick anyone from the whole game.
True.
Right?
That is true.
Okay, I'm gonna give a kind of annoying answer, I think, which is I'm going to pick Tetra from the Wind Waker, who shows up in a stained glass window in this game.
Fair.
And so the reason I do this is that I am incredibly emotionally invested in everyone in the Wind Waker and 0% emotionally invested in anyone except for like 5% of Zelda in this game.
Well, fair enough.
And so one of the things that gets me emotionally about this game is seeing the echoes of what happened to all these characters that I did love from the Wind Waker. And how, like, what happened in their stories and their lives after Phantom Hourglass, right? Because, like, that must have been a crazy story. Them, like, populating, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Getting people to migrate to this new land, naming it Hyrule, like, rediscovering their heritage. Tetra, like, embracing her royal lineage. Like, there's so much story that's implied by the status of New Hyrule in this game. About the Wind Waker characters. So Queen Tetra is my Z target.
I think that's a great pick, honestly. How do you feel about Nico being around still? He's over 100 years old. He's got to be like 120 at this point or something.
Yeah, that's true. I thought about picking Nico. I almost picked him, but so he must have seen a lot.
Also, question for the table. Do we think that the Link and Tetra combo is a romantic combo or just a friend combo?
Oh boy. Yeah.
I do not have enough information to speculate.
Fair enough.
I think that they were a friend combo because this Link and this Zelda do not appear to be related. And so I'm assuming that separate family lines happened.
That's fair.
Phantom Hourglass.
I think that's a fair read on the situation.
Yeah. I am curious. I mean, I know Tetra's your pick, Max, but while we have you here, how do you feel about this game's Zelda? Because Matt and I have kind of been referring to Zelda in Spirit Tracks as one of the high points. And honestly,
it's just top 4 Zeldas.
In some ways, a high watermark for Zeldas generally in the Zelda series. I mean, definitely not necessarily besting Skyward Sword or
Breath of the Wild,
Tears of the Kingdom, right? But like, definitely, I mean, up there
for sure.
So there's a quote I found where Aonuma says they did a bunch of like polling of Zelda players, and he said that they found that American Zelda fans in particular gave a lot of feedback that they didn't like Zelda being a damsel in distress, and they liked it when she was like had more autonomy in the story and was more, I don't know, like I can't remember the word he used, but it was some synonym of like spunky or sassy or something. So long story short, that was one of their starting points for this Zelda. And the other starting point was that the director apparently had a personal desire to involve Zelda more directly himself. This is the same guy that directed Phantom Hourglass, so that's kind of funny.
I thought he said he hated Tetra.
So there is a quote where he says he doesn't like Tetra. I'm a little bit unsure if it's a joke in that quote.
Oh, okay.
But
he certainly acted like it.
He said in this quote that he doesn't like Tetra, which is why it's Princess Zelda again instead of Tetra in this game.
Well, that makes sense, I guess.
Anyways, to actually answer your question, I think she's good. I think she's among the best Zeldas, but that's a really low bar. I think she's kind of only like Spunk, right? Like she doesn't really. I'm not very interested in her as a character. I like some of her slapstick moments, and I like some of her throwaway like comedy lines, and I like her overall like personality. But she's not like getting me emotionally involved like some of the the best Zeldas do, right? Like Zelda from Skyward Sword, or from Tears of the Kingdom, or even Ocarina of Time. Like those all do better on that front, I think.
I agree with
that. Which still puts her in a top 5 spot.
True. I agree that she's not as emotionally investing. It's just, I think it's refreshing for us to see her take an active role in things.
I agree. It's this
and
weird,
she is funny.
It's this interesting combo of Zelda being better characterized and also that being rolled into the companion character, right? Like,
yeah,
both of those things happening. Yeah.
I want them to do it again with a Zelda that is even better than this one.
Sure.
Yeah, like if you could have Tears of the Kingdom Zelda as your companion, wouldn't that be just like truly the most amazing thing ever?
Yep.
Yeah. Totally awesome.
Yep.
Anyway.
Cool. All right.
But it is noteworthy that this is a Zelda game with a playable Zelda, which people don't really acknowledge very often. But we have had playable Zelda before, and it was in this game.
And it's pretty good.
And it was done well. Yeah, like seriously. I mean, props. It was a success, I think.
I agree.
Yeah. In a game that is not rife with successes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into part 6. God damn, finally. Wow. I can't believe we're actually... Matt, we're in part 6.
We got there. We finally made it. Oh my God. What a absolute nightmare of a marathon have we had this evening. And like the episode is turning out good, but everything behind the pod...
Oh my God. Seriously, after editing, this is going to be such a great episode. Like the discussion has been awesome. Points have been spectacular. But
the actual recording of said episode has truly been...
Like, I feel like the guy who's like bringing the $6 million man back to life. Like, we have the technology, right? Like, I can... It's like, jeez.
Oh, man.
Okay. Matt.
Yes.
This is part 6.
It is.
Which is our final thoughts.
Yes.
In which I get to
let
you wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as you can think to do.
So we enter the presumed final section of the game, only to find that it is not the final section of the game, where we get to interact and fight with some new characters. We fight Burn. We see the failure of preventing Malladus's resurrection. We get to go to explore a new area in the Sand Realm, do some new things where more is less, meaning we don't do as many fetch questy bullshit crap quests, and get to explore one of the best temples in the game, if not the best temple of the game, with a truly fun item that takes a unique spin on utilization for puzzles instead of combat, all culminating in really a fantastic boss fight that is a lot of fun and hopefully will be memorable for a long time after. And then looking forward...
But don't hold your breath.
Don't hold your breath on that one. Looking forward to the finale of the game next week and discussing with Sam on our next episode.
Well done as always, Matt. Everything hurts and I'm dying.
I'm too old for this shit. Look, it's 12:35 in the morning, and this should have been over an hour ago outside of the technical difficulties. So
unprecedented for our show. Here, we need to have another
that.
cheers on Jack Bonded just because it
helped us through the night.
Max, did you have any liquid assistance this evening? Were you sipping anything?
I did. I enjoyed a maple dark and stormy. So
that sounds amazing.
Dark rum, lime juice.
That sounds spectacular.
Ginger beer and maple syrup.
That sounds truly amazing.
Yeah, dude. Wow.
It was quite tasty.
Okay. Good for you. Good for you.
Well, we owe you a new bottle of dark rum for the technical difficulties you've navigated with us.
Rum is not a category of alcohol that I dabble in at all.
I like dark rum in very small quantities for sipping. Like if I have like a shooter of dark rum that I can sip on for a bit, it's actually quite tasty. Yeah. But it's so sweet that I don't really engage with it very often.
So rum and cognac are the two that I just don't like. I've got nothing.
They're definitely aperitifs for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
My rum tonight was Costco brand, which I do not recommend.
That's fair. And I said
I do
aperitif.
Enjoy Kraken black spiced rum.
Oh man, that's a college drink, buddy.
Kraken and I have met at times.
We have gone on many an adventure.
Arguably, everything I drink is a college drink, so
also fair. And I said cognac and dark rums are aperitifs. I meant digestif, which is the after dinner drink. So
man,
anyway.
Someone was really going to call you out on that.
Honestly, with our Discord channel, yes.
You never know.
True.
You truly never do know.
Anyway.
Max, seriously, like, dude, this episode has been a marathon and we've really been through it. But like, honestly, it's been such a great discussion. And just thanks for bearing with us on this whole thing.
Thanks for being a true bro.
It was worth it. Thanks for giving me an excuse to play the Zelda game that I abandoned on the side of the road 13 years ago, 15 years ago. Oh God.
Here's my question for you, Max. Even if a Zelda game is bad, does playing it out of spite for the pure reason of critiquing it make it worth it to you?
Oh yeah, it does. I am not enjoying this game very much, but it is very interesting to me because I'm like a obsessed Zelda historian. And I enjoy playing it and being like, trying to like get in the heads of the developers. Like, why did they make these choices? What went on with the development to cause this thing to ship like this? Like, those are fun questions to me. And I do also like to try to understand why other people who are not myself enjoy the games that they do, even if I do not.
Right. Which we do know that which we do know those people exist, right? We know that some people like Spirit Tracks. So yep, totally agree. Regardless of all of that, I think the next time we're going to have you on this show is going to be on covering something that you and us like a lot more than this. The only remaining options are Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Master Quest, the Oracle games, and Tears of the Kingdom. So,
I mean, literally, there is nowhere to go but up from here. So,
yeah,
like
I love all of those remaining games.
Yeah, even Adventure of Link is arguably up from here. So,
but we're not replaying that.
We're not replaying that.
No. But so anyway, we'll see when we get to catch up with you next. But yeah, and all of those games. Well, actually, Majora's Mask is not longer than this one, but that's kind of an interesting discussion, Matt. We still need to figure out how whenever we get around to Majora's Mask, we need to figure out how we're organizing that season, right?
Hey, that's your job.
Yeah.
You are the producer.
I'll figure it out. But regardless, I mean, look, Oracles, Tears of the Kingdom, Master Quest. I mean, a lot of Max Nichols still to come.
Man, lots of good shit
to
come.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Max, I mean, you should probably do that thing. I mean, you reintroduced yourself at the top of the episode, so you should probably end the episode by reminding everybody where they can find you online and also giving the elevator pitch on Hyrule Interviews and what you do over there.
Yeah, so the thing I didn't mention when I introduced myself at the beginning is that I run a website / social media presence called Hyrule Interviews. And my website is a database of interviews with people who have worked on the Zelda series. I have something like 1,000 interviews in there. They're all like cross-referenced with metadata. like date and who was in the interview and what products we're talking about. The goal of my project is to shine light on developers who are not just the big figureheads like Aonuma and Miyamoto, but on everyone else. And for me personally, to have fun getting into the heads of the Zelda developers, because I'm a fanboy. So yes, you can find me if you Google Hyrule interviews or search for me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or I'm forgetting something. Blue Sky, all those places. I post daily quotes on all of them.
How is Blue Sky doing? Is it active? I mean, are people doing stuff over there, or?
It is my second most active place, which is to say it's not very active. Twitter is where I get the most engagement from people.
Okay. Just curious. But regardless of wherever you are most active on your social platforms, definitely encourage you to go give Max and Hyrule Interviews a follow, because Max himself is an interesting person to follow on socials with a lot of interesting observations on a variety of topics. But Hyrule Interviews itself is an excellent resource for just digging into the mindset of the developers, and after the fact clarity on a lot of these games. I find myself referencing it a lot, and honestly, it's amazing to me that nobody before you had thought to do what you're doing. But especially from the perspective of trying to like preserve the process of how these games were made, like it's a really monumental task, and I admire you a lot for undertaking it.
Agree. Also, one of the cool things about following Max on Twitter is that you can see him and I fight about Skyward Sword every once in a while.
Oh, geez. I truly do think, like, at the very end of this podcast, when we have nothing left to do, I'm just going to step back, and it's going to be a Max and Matt Skyward Sword season. And we're just going to see what happens.
That would be funny.
And this is coming off of last week's episode where Connor from Zelda Universe boldly declared Skyward Sword his favorite Zelda game of all time.
And possibly favorite video game of all time.
Which...
I could not agree with.
You guys are going to have him back on every episode.
Which even me, the acclaimed Skyward Sword apologist of the podcast, was like, that's a bold claim, brother. All right.
Yes, absolutely. But regardless, Max, next season we'll catch up with you again. But as far as tonight goes, dude, thanks for sticking through it with us. I mean, we appreciate you so much, and we will talk before too long.
All right. Have a nice night, friends.
It's morning, but thank you.
Say hello to the sun for me.
Exactly. All right, y'all. If you enjoyed today's show and you would like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it's not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show, and that makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on the finale of Spirit Tracks. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. Unfortunately, Spirit Tracks can only be played in 2 places. If you have a cartridge, you can play it on the Nintendo DS or 3DS. If you were lucky enough to buy it or unlucky enough to buy it on the Virtual Console on the Wii U before that shut down, then you can play it over there. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full. May your arrows never miss. Everything hurts. We'll catch you guys next time. Next week.
We're going to need a red potion at the end of this episode.
I'm going to play my one-time use fairy flute song. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. Finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.